Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Olivia, my queen, Alex roared in a hoarse voice, sneaking up behind her. Olivia turned around frightened and immediately stepped aside. Alex was on a roll tonight, and an obvious one at that. 40-degree alcohol always brought out the romantic fervor in this guy. An echo from a past life, so to speak. Your faithful knight arrives from his quest and pleads. Queen, I have the honor to lay my hand on your arm. Permission, Olivia quickly hid both hands behind her back. So much for the romantic, Alex said dejectedly to a stubbled Alex. I was so hoping that at least today would be lucky. Bad timing as always, Olivia only muttered. Why are you following me all over town? You're impossible to hide from. You're everywhere. It's love that guides me. He stuck out his chest proudly. Love, that's understandable. It can't steer you in another direction. Alex thought for a while and then sighed and shook his head. No, there's no way, Olivia, he switched to a whisper. But, well, it's easier and more fun just the two of us. Where you're lucky, where I'm trying. Leave me alone. She cut him off and walked away, overtaking passers-by. Alex followed, occasionally shouting out loud his conclusions about proud girls and their monstrous ingratitude to the loyal hearts that loved them. Olivia tried not to listen. She was in a hurry to get lost in the evening flow of people. There was still plenty to do today. She had to pick up the proceeds from last night's delivery. She skipped past a supermarket and a drugstore and stopped at the window of a small store. The window was filled with mannequins dressed up from yesterday. The shopkeeper, a full blonde with an elaborate hairdo, waved her hand. Come in. Here you go, she said, counting out the money. Yours, as agreed. It was a good trade, brand name clothes. Yes, and they were good quality. I could tell right away, Olivia remarked. Thanks, Laura. I thought I wouldn't get to you at all today. I had to run away from Alex. Can I have some tea? There's a kettle boiling in the back, Laura said. And while Olivia poured boiling water into cups, looked admiringly at her new outfit, turned to me. Oh, it doesn't look good. Hey, that's what quality stuff means. Like, look, but you have everything. And the main thing is that everything is free. You even have a bayou, Olivia laughed. Yeah, the beau is the most important thing. Except for the fact that he just wants me to share the bread spot with him. What? Are you serious? What a rascal, an Alfonso. And you're still lucky, Laura sighed. I even envy you sometimes. I wish I were so lucky. I'm homeless, damn it. No home, no family, and not even an ID. So much for lucky, Olivia countered. At least you're neat. You dress nice. I never would have guessed that a lady like you would be a tramp. And you're loaded, too. Your stuff sold for $5,000 today alone. Where did those things come from? The woman gave Olivia a hard look. I'm an Adams who just got a little luckier than the rest of us. But Lauren wasn't about to give up. A little bit. If only everyone had a little bit more of that, we'd all be prosperous and happy. Well, here's to that. And Olivia presented her cup. She had to get home. She didn't have a home. But she had a cozy basement full of books. It was even warm. Apparently, somewhere near the central heating line. An absolute lottery win for the homeless. A generous dump, I guess, Olivia thought. I was lucky indeed. The neighborhood was wonderful, quiet, green, with clean streets and safe new places, and the houses were a respectful distance apart. It's a new trend, keeping personal boundaries so secure, it's convenient. No one peeked from his window as the neighbors in the house across the street changed clothes. I guess it's a good thing and gives some sense of security. It's just a pity that people have begun to socialize less, but this is an inevitable consequence, which is easy to accept. Grandma came out of the entryway in the twilight, towards evening. It was strange. The young girl Olivia had been hanging around this house for 2 months now, and had learned well the habits, weaknesses, and even the daily routines of the residents. It was knowledge necessary like the rules of the road. His grandmother had not just a routine, but a whole way of life that she never broke. At 10:0, whatever the weather, she'd go for a walk. After that, she would return home. And the next time she would go out at about 16:0. Already well-dressed and in full parade, she would go with her friends to a cafe and return at 9 o'clock. Olivia realized this from the scraps of conversation. Granny always willingly stopped to chat with the neighbors, but something unusual must have happened today. Broken some spring in the clock once and for all determined the mode of day sweet grandmother. And look at her. She goes to the dumpster, and in her hands a transparent bag full of clothes. Well, that's good too. Olivia was glad to see that she was going to have twice as much money as usual this month. Vagrants, no matter what anyone said, were people too. Life isn't free. Yes, it takes less money, but you can't live without it. Grandmother didn't realize she was only a few steps away from Olivia, though she didn't notice anyone. Her face was so pensive and sad that it was clear she wouldn't have been noticed in a herd of elephants. Now she was upset about something. The bag went into the trash can, and Grandma hurried back without lifting her gaze from the ground. Olivia waited about 5 minutes to be sure, and trying to stay off the lighted areas of the asphalt, hurried to the dumpster. Actually, the dumpsters in the rich neighborhood are generous. How much stuff do these rich people throw away? They're the ones on TV who are all noble. They're promoting sensible consumption, reusable bags. But in reality, how much can their garbage tell about a person? Garbage is like an X-ray in this respect. You can see through it all. Take, for example, the stocky man who recently moved into a new building. Every evening he carries a huge bag to the trash cans, and it's like a Michelin-starred restaurant. There's charcuterie and cheesecake. Fish for every taste. Smoked, salted, and fried also happens. And dessert is a must: cake, cream, and chocolate bridge. It seems, what kind of madness does a person create? Why buy so much food when you can't eat it anyway? Olivia knows the answer. A stocky man's wife wants to be a model. A long girl who walks around like that and goes to all kinds of castings every day. Olivia got that from her own mouth. No, of course, this beauty does not talk to homeless people. But on the phone chattering nonstop, will go out into the yard and while going to the car, gibbering. I'm on the casting again, maybe at least there will be taken. No, I do not lose hope. Here I'll get to Paris, and I will have multi-million-dollar contract. And look, then comes back in 3 hours. Sad, mascara smeared under the eyes and carries bags of food from supermarkets, from camp. You can see she won't quit. And then, as she remembers that she's a model, not a full girl, requires her husband to take everything to the trash. That's the story of their family life. Once a week on Saturdays, the man gets drunk and then chases his model all over the apartment, screaming in the street, yelling that she's not a good woman, and that she's doing nonsense. She'd better give him a child. And she replies that children will ruin her career, and she still hopes. And then it's back to multi-million-dollar contracts in Paris. And here's a teenage girl. She lives in the same house as the model once a month. She takes her entire closet to the trash. Why? Who knows? I mean, she never wears anything more than 3 times. But her father and daughter don't live with her. But he comes to visit from time to time, but he doesn't come to the apartment. Either his ex-wife won't let him in or he doesn't want to. But his daughter comes out to see him. They sit in the courtyard, talk, and then she goes somewhere with him, unknown where. She comes back. The bags with foreign inscriptions do not fit in her hands. Her father helps her carry them to the elevator. In general, even these 2 residents of an elite house are enough to not need anything. Olivia has even formed a small business. The discarded girls' clothes she takes to the market, turns things in, and they give her the money. Also, cheap cafes take unopened, raw sausages for a small amount of money. The main thing for them is that the packaging was not damaged, but the expiration date had not expired, and she, of course, does not have time for it. In short, you can live here, and how to live, if you are closed and also earn money. The only condition is that you don't get caught. But Olivia is a homeless person with experience, you could say, a professional, 8 years wandering, so she has so much experience that, God forbid, will not dream. And this, by the way, is not an exaggeration. Indeed, God forbid. But now she's found her little paradise. What is there to complain about? Especially if life sometimes brings surprises, like the unexpectedly dumped bag of clothes that made a loud rustling sound and felt too dense to touch. Olivia was used to everyone using the usual trash bags at every store at Plink, and now it seemed that her find was making a noise so loud that the whole house could hear it. She quickly skirted to the left of the dumpster and onward exactly to a good meter-by-meter patch of ground, and then fell through the ground. In fact, it was also a piece of the mosaic that made up the fairy tale life a long time ago. And even before a new building with prohibitively expensive apartments had sprung up nearby. There were garages and a few basements dug right into the ground. Of course, when construction began, both were removed. Except for this one here. It was just set back from the others. It didn't interfere with the construction. After the first tenants came and started planting lawns, they found this basement, locked it up, but decided not to touch it. Who knows why? Maybe it was just a memory of times gone by. Or maybe they liked the lush nettles that grew around the perimeter of the cellar. The rich have their quirks. For Olivia, the lock was a matter of minutes and one right curved hairpin. She climbed down to the basement down some decent stairs and struck a match against the wall. Inside, a treasure was revealed. Along the walls, neatly wrapped from dampness and cellophane, were stacks of books. There were works of Russian and foreign classics, beautiful albums with reproductions of paintings, and something scientific. Olivia looked through the books mesmerized and couldn't understand. How could people throw away such wealth? And then she decided that perhaps this cellar belonged to some scientist who had died of old age long ago, and his children or even grandchildren were indifferent to knowledge, did not like to read, and did not understand the value of books, packed and threw everything in the cellar. Why should they keep books in the house? No one began to read anymore, and there were enough books. Olivia loved to read, and in this wonderful basement she felt really happy. Now she often spent evenings here, devoting herself to reading. As a child, she remembered well the huge library where her grandmother worked. She wasn't supposed to come to work with her children, but little Olivia had no one to leave her with. So she was always very quiet, so her presence was overlooked, and she learned to read early. And at school she knew all Pushkin's fairy tales by heart, and a lot of different poems. And about the flea, and about the exquisite giraffe from Chad. Teachers marveled. And once settled here, she never tried to sell a single book for clothes or food. She'd never leave a book behind. Olivia went downstairs and closed the door of her dwelling silently. It wasn't really a door. Aluminum sheets on rusty hinges. Olivia turned on her pocket flashlight and oiled it to keep it from squeaking. She began dismantling the package. The contents were more than entertaining. A light summer jacket, a t-shirt, and a pair of fashionably worn jeans. By the way, the scuffs were clearly not from time. Stylish design. And also in the bag were found new sunglasses, sneakers, wristwatch, silver chain, and a beautiful leather belt, odd as if some man had been stripped, left in his underwear, and his clothes thrown in the trash. The clothes were recently purchased, almost new, but they'd definitely been worn by someone. They smelled like men's perfume. Olivia checked all the pockets for any forgotten wallet or documents, just in case. Nothing, just some scrap of paper in a hidden pocket. Olivia looked at it and shuddered at read, in the scrawled handwriting of a hurrying man. I'm at Micharina 21. Help. What? Olivia fidgeted with the paper. Was this some kind of joke? Well, yes, of course it's a joke. It couldn't be true. Who would put a note in their pocket asking for help if it could have fallen out and gotten lost? I mean, there's no telling what could have happened. Or this grandmother could not just throw away other people's things, but, for example, burn them. By the way, it would be more accurate to burn if indeed this note was not a he who throws such evidence into the trash. She began to look at all the things again, this time meticulously, directing the light of the flashlight at every seam and every centimeter of fabric. There were a couple drops of blood on the t-shirt, and there's more on the jeans, almost invisible. But if you look closely, Olivia hastily stuffed the items back into the bag. The similar story she'd gotten herself into was dark and very dangerous. Most of all, because this address was familiar to her, she closed her eyes and felt as if she were back there, back in the days of her unemployed childhood, where her grandmother was still around, alive and cheerful, in the house, though simple, was still intact, giving warmth to its occupants. She used to live on Micharina, and her address was not much different, Micharina 19. And opposite, at number 21, stood an old abandoned dacha. It was said that some scientist used to live there, but after his death no one lived there and no one knew if the scientist had any heirs. But in any case, it didn't matter. There were no applicants for the dacha. What if we pay a visit there? Olivia whispered. She'd only been there once since her grandmother's death, and she hadn't spent more than a day in the house. because her gray-haired mother had appeared out of nowhere and announced that she was selling the house, and Olivia didn't belong there anymore. She tried to object, but then her mother went into such an act that it was sickening to watch. "Olivia, I know you're judging me," her mother informed her in a shaky voice. "And you probably have a right to be. I left, started a new family. I didn't want to leave you. I wrote to Grandma from the beginning saying I wanted to come and get you, but she was against it. She said that there were no conditions there for a little girl, that I was living in a dormitory. When I was about to get married, I wrote again that I would take you away, especially since Vanessa was due to be born." Olivia really wanted them to grow up together, but her grandmother was against it again, demanding that she come here and live with her and her daughter in this house, said she should leave Vanessa to her father because she didn't need her here. Vanessa sat sadly at the table, flipping through photo albums. "But how could I leave her with tears?" the mother asked. "The father is at work all the time. There's no one around. Were you even with your grandmother? Did you have someone to look after you? And now you want me to be gone?" And Olivia asked. Sell the house. It has to be sold," her mother pleaded. "Olivia, understand me. Vanessa's father and I are divorced. He found some young woman and now he's sharing the apartment with. Vanessa and I are going to be on the street. Don't you care?" Vanessa had already lost interest in the pictures and now she took an apple from the vase and took a bite. "Where am I supposed to go?" Olivia's voice was cold fury. "You have weddings and divorces, Vanessa, and I have to go homeless so that you and he can live in warmth and comfort. But live how? Do you have a heart?" "Oh, Vanessa, get up. We're leaving. I don't want to stay here with that." The mother ran out of the house, dragging her precious daughter behind her like a tugboat from the night before. Olivia woke up to the smoke and acrid smell of burning filth. She ran out of the house just in time to notice a car pulling away, and from the back seat, Vanessa sent her an air kiss. Olivia had never looked at Micurina Street since. What was the point of looking at ashes? "All right," she continued in the same whisper. "Well, I went there. Let's say I went there. And what can I see there? If the person who wrote the note is hiding somewhere all night, Olivia couldn't sleep a wink. And early in the morning, she got out of her basement and went to Micurina. What she wanted to find out, she didn't know. But maybe her heart would tell her something. What could it tell her? "Queen," yes, Olivia heard a familiar drunken voice. Alex, as usual, had tracked her down without sobering up. She flashed. "I can't. Seeing you makes me dizzy. I can tell. All right, leave me alone. I gotta go." "Lena." Alex was stubborn. "You stupid girl. Let's live together. And they say you have a basement and so much food that you can't eat alone." Olivia moved away from him squeamishly. Alex was at that stage of intoxication when he suddenly began to tell the truth, and it was impossible to listen to him without How familiar was the road to home? Or rather, what was left of it? Olivia turned away from the charred remains that no one had thought to clean up. It was better to look at the address from the note. It was a sad sight, though. The garden, once full of apple trees and rose bushes, was overgrown with trash. The roses had been eaten by spider mites, and the apple trees had long since stopped bearing fruit and were empty. The house grew old little by little. Its appearance faded without caring hands and looked somehow inappropriate and pathetic in its decrepit bar beauty. And it had begun long, long ago. Little Olivia sometimes asked her grandmother why such a spacious good house stood neglected. "Because nobody needed it," answered her grandmother. "It's not only with houses, but with people too. For example, a grandfather lives, and as long as there are children and grandchildren around him, he has the strength to live. But as soon as he is left alone, you see him getting weaker, decrepit, and 6 months later they call you to the wake." She always said those words sadly. When she was 5, Olivia didn't understand the reason, but as she grew older, she was able to figure it all out. She found her mom's letters to her grandmother. After her husband died, Mom moved away. She was offered an excellent job with a good salary somewhere far away in the north. And Mom, leaving, promised she'd be back in a year. And a year later, this letter came. Mom wrote that she had met a good man and was going to remarry. "Don't blame me," she said. "I couldn't decide to tell him I had a daughter for a long time. I stalled until he proposed, and now I'm even more hesitant. Think about it. But where are we going to put a baby? Especially when my future husband has no idea about her. And now I'm going to hang my daughter on him. We've got a young family to take care of, a place of our own to live and furnish. Where are we going to take Olivia? There's nowhere to put her, except with me in a dormitory in a neuro crib. No matter how you look at it, there's no room for a baby here, and you'll have her revised and taken care of. Of course, I'll try to send money, but not much. We have so many expenses right now. We've got to have a modest wedding, too. It'll be embarrassing in front of my friends. Perhaps later I will be able to tell my husband everything, the mother wrote. Well, she in the next letter, which came a year after the first, my mother already shared the happy news. She and her new husband had a daughter. Of course, so early. We did not plan, the mother wrote. But what can you do? It just happened that way. Now you not only have a granddaughter, but also a granddaughter, Vanessa. So far, we all live in a dormitory, but in a year or two, we'll be able to save up for a small but our own apartment. You can't imagine how high prices are for everything here, especially winter clothes. But you can't do without them in our climate. It's freezing, 50 here. It's horrible. That's why we can barely make ends meet. So we're not taking Olivia yet. We can't feed another mouth. Sure, we can always get her a bowl of soup. But what about clothes, shoes, daycare? There's neither money nor time for her. And frankly, I'm in no hurry to tell my husband about her. What if he gets angry and, God forbid, leaves Vanessa and me? We can't survive on his paycheck. So first, I'll wait until my maternity leave is over so I can go back to work. Apparently, Mom's maternity leave lasted a very long time because there were no more letters from her. Or maybe Grandma didn't keep them like those first two anymore. What difference does it make to you? But here, the front door stiffened, and from it came a push. With powerful kicks, a man in a teepee and old, badly stretched athletic pants tumbled out. He had rubber overshoes on his feet. I hadn't seen how they drove since I was a child, and following him was an elderly man, but sturdy. In his other hand, he held a shotgun, and from time to time shouted to Vanessa to move more vigorously. Get away from you. This was followed by another weighty kick. The first one lost his bruised lower back and walked more briskly for a while. Olivia lurked, hiding behind a tree, and almost stopped breathing. It wasn't a lie, but it seemed to be a note. Something strange was going on here. Meanwhile, the older man stopped and commanded the younger one to, Olivia, listen to my command. Today, you're going to clear the weeds from the ground. You'll start at this edge. And by lunchtime, you're going to be weed-free all the way to the porch. If you do that, you'll go to bed hungry. Then he sat down on the porch steps. He put the rifle on his knees and took a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket. An hour to stand, Blondie. The young man muttered something under his nose and wandered toward the thicket of weeds. Come on, work. Look, cheer up. His words came from the porch. The boy bent down to pluck the first weed from the ground. And when he did, to toss it aside, Olivia almost shrieked. Vanessa. Now she understood how she hadn't recognized her before. She hadn't seen her face, but that loose figure, that helplessness in every movement, was unmistakable. Vanessa. How? Why was she here? She hadn't seen her sister in years, not since the night her and her grandmother's house burned down. But she hadn't really changed much, and she was just as inept. You could even see it in the way she pulled weeds, grabbing them not from the root, but from the very tops, the tops snapping off. Vanessa grabbed the trunk again, and her overseer grinned as he watched the inept suffer from the porch. Down, take the root. Easy, Olivia commanded, looking closely and seeing that Vanessa's right ear looked a little swollen. That explained the drop of blood on her clothes. You're screwed, Sister Vanessa. You're so screwed, I don't even want to get involved. First of all, there's a determined man with a sawed-off shotgun sitting on the porch. It's dangerous to interfere in his domain, they'll shoot you. Second of all, let Vanessa root around in the weeds. What's wrong with that? She could use some weight loss. Poor Olivia chuckled heavily. She walked leisurely back to her basement hideout. And it was a good thing she did, because when she entered the familiar courtyard, she was almost nose to the old lady of the town. She was not surprised to see Olivia. No, wait, good morning, sweetheart. She said hello. Olivia stopped. I can't believe what I'm hearing. That's right, Grandma, you know me? Granny smirked. But where did you come from? I'm a blind and deaf fossil. But what's true is true. My eyesight is really not what it was when I was young. But, work habits are rarely, almost never forgotten. When you've worked as an investigator all your life, the old lady said. I never would have thought so. By the way, I hope you like my husband's books. That's good. Read them at your leisure. Just please, treat the books carefully. Agreed. So you know where I live too. Yes, you don't have to worry about that. I'm not a gossip. You don't hurt anyone. You don't get drunk. So this is your basement. Then, Olivia, I took a deep breath and made up my mind quickly before her resolve faded. We need to talk about something. That bag of men's clothes you threw away last night. I packed it up. I don't need those things. But I found a note in my pocket, and I realized, by some indication, that the note was a request for help and an address. I had just been, her face took on the impenetrable expression of a former investigator, and now the grandmother of God's dandelion. Agnes Polly was expecting recriminations, scolding, and a promise to immediately turn the homeless in to the police, but nothing of the sort happened. The old lady smiled meekly and sadly. Say, can I invite you to my house? I would not like to talk about such topics on the street. People around hear much more than it seems at first glance. Your experience tells you that too, Olivia grinned. Yes, if you don't mind a cup of tea, then let's go. By the way, you can call me Agnes Polly. And you, Olivia? It's a pretty name, said Grandma. Is it? I believe it has Scandinavian roots. Yes, it does. The original pronunciation is Helga. It means sacred. That's what linguists teach investigators. No, that's what linguists learn. My husband Smith, George, was a linguistic scholar specializing in the Scandinavian language group. You come into the room and make yourselves comfortable. I'll put the kettle on. Olivia followed her grandmother down the corridor. Well, grandmothers are not as simple as they seem. The apartment Agnes Polly had brought her to was astonishing in its furnishings. It seemed to Olivia that all grandmothers' dwellings must be old-fashioned, with some greasy napkins on an ancient television set and stooped porcelain figurines. But Agnes Polly was no ordinary grandmother. The furniture is clearly new and very comfortable. The walls are light-colored, and the kitchen was so spacious and bright, with many levels of lighting and flowers and some unimaginably beautiful pots. I've only seen such apartments in magazines. And how do you like it? My eldest son's wife came up with a design. I really like it. Wouldn't it happen that my stuff would end up in a dumpster and I'd end up at 20 Main Street? Olivia asked. Why would I do that? Without turning around, the landlady said, What do you think? I'm running a slave network. It doesn't cost me much to keep one idiot. But while our tea is brewing, I'll tell you something. Have a seat. Olivia took a seat in a soft chair with a high-carb back. It's not a chair, it's a throne. It's a pity to sit on one. Agnes Polly sat opposite. I don't even know where to begin, she admitted. So I'll tell it as it comes. And you can ask me if there's anything you don't understand. Olivia nodded. Smith, George and I had 2 sons. The older one, his name is Andrew, has always been a rather malleable and serious young man just right for his age. No nonsense, no girls. He graduated from school with a gold medal, then from university, and also with a red diploma, gained good experience, gained useful acquaintances, and even opened his own business. At first it was a small firm, but Andrew was not upset, continued to work, and now he supplies computer software to the whole city. He's doing just fine, and very proud of his son, such, exemplary child. But the younger Alex is a slacker and a mama's boy, Olivia suggested innocently. It's a common occurrence. The younger ones are usually spoiled. But Agnes Polly only sighed and shook her head. Just the opposite. But sometimes I think that maybe it would be better if he were less independent, less determined and brave. You see, Alex, he's very smart, too smart, but how shall I put it? With a bit of an adventurous streak. Yes, when he was a student, he went to the gold mines for 2 months, knee-deep in mud. Although he could have been lying on the beach and picking up beautiful girls, or he went to some new fields. I don't remember, something to do with precious stones. Then he got his diploma and went north. I cried, begging him to come home. I used to get scared when I'd listen to the weather report. God, it's so cold up there, such a long winter. The pay is very attractive, of course, but I think Alex was drawn to the romance of adventure. And that's where he met a charming girl up north. They got married. Soon they had a son. I guess everything could have been perfect. They had a very decent place to live. They traveled a lot, went halfway around the world. It's just a pity the mother spoiled the child terribly. And then, when the kid was about 13, she decided to get a divorce. Apparently, she'd made a friend and a patron, and she was probably hoping to marry him. I don't know how successful she was, but she went off somewhere, took the baby, and no one ever heard from her again. Over the next few years, Alex went through a very difficult time. For him, getting through something meant going headfirst into his work. And, unfortunately, this zeal ended in a heart attack. They didn't save him in time. Grandmother kept silent, closed her eyes. Her eyelids were wrinkled and her skin was as thin as tissue paper. There was a thin wrinkle between her eyebrows. "Huh? Are you all right?" Andrew asked. Would you like some water?" "No, dear. Thank you, Smith George." My husband couldn't get over the death of his son. Lenny, though he often scolded Alex for his adventurousness, was secretly proud of him and respected him for it. Good for him. And when Alex was gone, his father didn't even live a year after the funeral. By that time, our northern grandson showed up and went straight to his uncle, Andrew. He, of course, was happy, after all, Alex's son, but it turned out that the boy came not to visit, but for help. He began to tell that his mother was seriously ill and needed treatment, that her boyfriend had abandoned her, and now they had to literally survive, because all the money was spent on medicine. He even showed some bills, printouts, extracts from the medical history. The sums were really a lot. Andrew has a good heart. It didn't even occur to him to check anything. I mean, family don't lie to each other. At least they shouldn't. So he immediately gave his nephew quite an impressive amount of money, and even offered him a good salary in his firm. He wouldn't tell me anything. He didn't want to bother me. Vanessa, what's my grandson's name? I gladly agreed to his offer, but he worked with his sleeves up, apparently relying on the fact that his uncle will not kick him out of work. You know, he is not feeling well and therefore will not come out that late, almost 12s. And on top of that, his paycheck wasn't enough. He constantly borrowed from all employees and never returned the debts, all the time referring to his uncle, the owner of the company. When the situation escalated, the employees came to Andrew and asked him to look into the whole story. Vanessa, however, began to deny everything. No one, she said, she did not borrow money from anyone. And in general, all this is all dirty slander against her white. Finally, Andrew couldn't stand it any longer and praised Vanessa. When the grandson came to me and again told his sad story about his sick mother on a miserable existence, and I at Lenny, as you have already noticed, professional observation has not lost. I was listening to Vanessa, and I was looking at her salon, at the styling, the fancy hair decorations. You know, such a delicate delicate that some orders just seem big. In the sun, it's really hard to see what it's coloring, unless you know where to look. The thing about dyed hair is that it's a little different in texture. They're a little drier than the ones untouched by dye. But I'm getting carried away, sorry. So noticed in that the clothes on my grandson is quite expensive and bought recently, and the jewelry is silver, but not cheap. I know the manufacturer is a jeweler, so the whole look of the grandson did not connect with his sad story. But you have to admit, it's very strange. The mother has no money for treatment. The son doesn't know how to help her, and he looks like he could be on the cover of a magazine. I promised to help, but I asked for 2 days. Allegedly, because of some complications and bank delays, Vanessa was very happy and immediately ran away, without even asking if I needed any help. I won 2 days. I decided to use that time to learn more about her mother's illness. And about my grandson in general, I used some of the connections I had from work. And here's what I found out. Vanessa's mother lives and thrives in a wonderful, warm country. She did break up with her patron, but only after he mysteriously went bankrupt. I have some speculation about that. I think that motives, they as well as he himself, played no small part. Moreover, I learned that my former daughter-in-law also has a daughter, which she successfully hid from everyone. The girl had been born in her first marriage, before Ollie. Ollie knew his fiancée was married, widowed, but never heard of the child. Where's the girl now? No one knows, but she's not in touch with her mother. As for Vanessa, this young lady was promising. She obviously learned a lot from her mother. By the way, they quarreled because Vanessa's demands grew faster than her mother's income. That's when she remembered her father's relatives and showed up to turn off as much money as possible from Andrew and me. Olivia stretched out. How ugly poor Agnes Polly is. Would she have known she was telling her story to the very same missing girl? Olivia bit her lip. To tell her or not to tell her? What if she didn't believe it? Or, God forbid, she'd get sick, a heart attack. And then what? Grandma's not 20 years old. No, it's better not to say anything. So, Grandma's already been through a lot. It's a very sad story. On the aside, Agnes Polly said, and I feel very bad for Ollie. For all his boyish sense of adventure, he was never a rogue. And he'd never take anything from anyone else in his life. On the contrary, he always worked hard and left the others far behind. But his son, it turns out, is nothing like him. It's a great disappointment to both Andrew and myself. And now I have a confession to make. After my husband died, I mourned my grief for a long time. But 2 years passed, the pain dulled, and a new friend came into my life. Or rather, I let him become a part of my life and my heart. At Marvelly. So you have a fiancé, it turns out. I'm very happy for you, you know. Grandmother explained with embarrassment. He and I worked together for years, side by side, you might say. And he was in love with me, even though he was very polite. He never let himself go too far. But we women always feel that way. I respected his delicacy and was grateful for it. You see, he's a very decent man. He wasn't trying to take my husband away from me, to destroy my family. But I knew how he felt. Professional observation. Olivia smiled. She suddenly realized that she had taken a liking to this extraordinary grandmother. Exactly, Agnes Polly continued. And when my dear husband passed away, if you have been happily married for so many years, you can't imagine anyone else in his place. I didn't even think about having another affair. But Ethan Smith is the coworker who's in love. Yes, he was so alert, kind, always near, always ready to help. Gradually, we grew closer. Of course, this is not the love that comes at 17, but at 17, the needs are different. You want passion, drama, flight. And at our age, completely different things are important. Trust, respect, care. So that's why I'm telling you this. I decided to ask my friend for advice. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. In the end, I was just afraid to give that young extortionist money. But then Vanessa would realize she'd found a new cash cow. She'd come back, and I'd have to keep her funded. And if you don't, well, can you imagine what a con man would do for a big score? Olivia grinned, remembering herself standing in front of the burning house and her brother's satisfied face, the air kiss from the back seat of the car and the roar of the fire behind her. I can, she said. I really can. And that's when Ethan Smith offered me his plan of action, which I fully endorsed. You can judge me, Olivia. But first try to understand. So I told my granddaughter I was going to the bank to withdraw my savings. I told her I needed to be there in person, but I wasn't feeling well. So I asked her to accompany me. Vanessa agreed, especially since I said I'd pay for the cab. Of course, I didn't call a cab. Instead, I just called Ethan Smith. He arrived disguised as a driver. The rest was very simple. We took Vanessa to our old summer house in the suburbs. There, Ethan Smith physically coerced Vanessa into giving us her clothes. He took her phone, her papers, gave her work rags, and showed her the sleeping quarters. And now he's doing his granddaughter's labor training. What's labor training? Early rise, exercise, breakfast. After weeding weeds, cleaning and repairing the house, then lunch, further work, at 20:00 dinner, at 21:00 dinner, at 21:00 bedtime, and Vanessa reads a pedagogical poem for half an hour. At breakfast retells what she has read. Olivia couldn't stand it and laughed. Why are you laughing, Olivia? Grandmother asked with a soft reproach. You know everything now. And tell me, did we do the right thing with Ethan Smith or not? It was right, Olivia said, wiping away the tears that had escaped. Honestly, you're a badass, but do you think it'll work? Do you think that big forehead can be rehabilitated? I think it might, said Agnes Polly. At any rate, you see, even if she doesn't lose her vicious desire to get rich at other people's expense, she will at least be afraid. Now she would know and remember for a long time that it was possible to get into very, very serious trouble. She didn't have that experience before, but now she does. Let's see, how long will she be in there? Grandma shrugged. That's up to Ethan Smith. He thinks that 5 or 6 months will be enough. They won't look for her anyway. There's no one to look for her. She hasn't spoken to her mother for a long time, and she has no friends. But where would friends come from for someone who doesn't know what friendship is? People like her only know how to take advantage of others and betray them at the first opportunity, Olivia said, still chuckling, and stood up from the table. Well, that clears it up, doesn't it? Thank you for telling me, Agnes Polly. It's clear to me now that you didn't do anything terrible, and that you promised to help your granddaughter, and you are helping her to become a human being. Goodbye. And I won't say a word. Agnes Polly answered her with her trademark squint. Aren't you leaving early, Olivia? You have a story to tell, don't you? Olivia had a sudden thought. I mean, that grandma knows who I am. There's no way she didn't ask your sister-in-law's oldest daughter if I was the missing girl, Vanessa's sister. Olivia sank silently back into her chair. So you figured it out, Agnes Polly said, grinning. I've got some pretty good connections, haven't I? I've got a good brain, too. It works despite my more than advanced age. I'm guessing the house at 19 Maturina burned down for a reason. Faulty wiring. You can't fool me with that. You have to, Olivia replied glumly. It's Vanessa's fault. She didn't even try to hide. She wanted me to see who'd left me without a roof. If I'd been older or smarter, but I was only 16. I didn't want to go to the orphanage. They tried to put me there, but I ran away. I went to get a job. Of course, without a profession, I couldn't count on much. But I didn't need much. I just needed a place to sleep and something to eat. I was entrusted to wash dishes in a cafe. I lived in a back room there. By the way, they didn't pay me any money, but they fed me for free and gave me at least a corner. The owner was an adventurer with girls. I'd been working for a week or so, and then he came over in the middle of the night. I thought maybe he brought some groceries, but he burst into my back room, drunk as a skunk, and went with his instincts. How did I freak out? I grabbed what I could, which was a zucchini, and I hit him right on his drunken head with it. He's standing there holding his head and screaming at the top of his voice. What's he gonna do now? First that he turned me into the police for attempted murder. I got scared, grabbed my passport, and ran away. I was afraid he'd come looking for me. I wandered around, starving. Once at the market, a merchant gave me apples for free. They were old, already wormy, but I ate them in one sitting, and they tasted better than anything else in the world. I don't think I've ever eaten anything more delicious in my life. One day, I fell asleep at the train station. I was robbed. My bag was stolen. I had my passport and some change. That's all I had left afterwards. But what's there to tell? I ended up here. I have food, clothes, some money, and even books. What more could one want? Agnes Polly took her hand. Olivia, she shook her head. You've simply forgotten that it's possible to live differently. From a homeless person's point of view, you certainly have everything, but is it your choice to wander, to starve, to live in basements? No. You didn't choose that. You just accepted it. But you can wish for a normal life. A home, a family, a job, and at least relative safety. Isn't that sad? Olivia smiled. Where do you get all that? It's fixable. I'll help you get your papers back, and then you can learn something. Get a profession, get a job. In the meantime, stay with me. Don't worry, you won't get in my way. There's enough room for both of us, but so you don't feel like a burden, but you'll do the grocery shopping and the cleaning. But I'll pay you as a housekeeper. And when Vanessa fixes up our cottage, you'll move in, and we'll get the deed done. And the house will be yours by deed. Olivia shook her head. Poor Agnes Polly, a saintly person. But is it possible to offer help like that to the first person you meet? What if I, Olivia, am no better than Vanessa? It's the same genes. No, Agnes Polly, I can't do that. You can. In an unappealing tone, the hostess replied, After all, it was my grandson who burned down your house. So let's consider it a small compensation. Now get everything you need from your cellar and let's move in. Agnes Polly, answer me one question. I really wonder why you keep your books in the cellar. There's a whole library there, and such a fine one. That, her side grandmother, is because of me. After my husband died, I couldn't look at them. I kept remembering how he used to sit with a book in a chair by the fireplace, how he used to read before going to bed. Even when he took a bath, he'd take a book with him. Now this whole library was like an orphan, about him. Every time she saw those books, Olivia couldn't keep from crying. The doctors had advised her to put them away temporarily, but now she smiled. It seemed like a good time to put them back where they belonged. What do you think? Olivia walked out of the apartment, still not believing that everything that had happened wasn't a dream. But how could it be possible? After so many interminably long years of wandering and starvation and humiliation to which she'd grown accustomed, to suddenly become a person with papers, a job, a home again. As she approached her basement, she suddenly heard the ubiquitous Alex again. "My queen, you are more beautiful than a May morning." The homeless man sat cross-legged on the aluminum roof of the basement, looking around as if he were at least a crown prince. "What do you want again?" Olivia asked tiredly. "Did my beauty turn your brain off again?" "Off and on," Alex paused meaningfully. I followed you this morning, my dear." "And what about that kid who was enslaved by a man with a gun? And now I'm wondering what I'm going to get for this information. I mean, knowing about Olivia has to do something. Otherwise, who needs it?" His florid speech, Olivia knew it well, was the result of being well-read and well-educated. Alex came from a good family, liked to learn, and had even taught at the university for a while. He'd been on the streets because of his vices. The poor man was an inveterate gambler, one of those who lost everything he had in slot machine. The apartment he got from his parents, a brand new car. When he was kicked out of his job for playing preference with students, Alex became a vagrant, but he was not particularly upset. Even on the contrary, he considered it a great good fortune because now he could not pretend to be an ordinary person and not to fulfill any duties, not to think about his future. If he had money, he lost it in games, won, lived as a king for a couple of days, lost, went hungry and disgustingly sober, looking for someone to feed and poor. "My life has been simplified to the point of concentration," he declared. "Just basic needs, and no excessive stresses that kill individuals in so-called civilized society. And I'm free and happy if I have a couple of coins and a piece of bread." Olivia looked at the satisfied Alex and smiled. "Alex," she said at last, "that man with the gun is my old neighbor, and the boy is his grandson, who is preparing for military service. So he is learning to obey commands quickly and clearly, getting used to the army routine. He asked his grandfather to train him. So I'm afraid you won't get anything for this information." "Yes, surprised the homeless man. Well, it's a pity, of course, but not really." "Just what? Maybe still agree to live with me?" "Pension plans." "No, I will not agree. But if you help me carry books from the basement, you can take it alone. I'm moving in." "Wow, I'll help you," he said eagerly, and was the first to rush inside. Sarah ran down the street with her heart racing. She was late. But how could this be happening now? During the night, her phone had run out of battery, and the alarm clock, of course, did not ring on time. When the girl opened her eyes, she immediately realized that she had overslept. It was too light outside. Luckily, she had prepared her dress from the evening, and it didn't need to be ironed. Of course, she wanted to do light makeup, but under the severe time constraints, that would do. Sarah hastily tied a high ponytail and managed to eat a sausage sandwich. Yes, it was unhealthy, calorie-dense food. But in her early 20s, she was clearly not in danger of becoming overweight. And now the girl did not walk, but ran along the sidewalk, almost flew to the bus stop. If the bus was a little late, she could still make it. She really needed to get to the interview. There weren't many people around. The streets seemed unusually deserted. It was a busy time. Everyone had already gotten to work, and lunch was still a long way off. If Sarah had more time, she would have loved to see the bright colors in the flower beds and the leaves on the trees starting to turn yellow. The beginning of fall is the most beautiful season of the year. But the girl was hopelessly late because of her own short-sightedness. How could she forget to put her phone on the charger? Sarah quickened her pace. She needed to make a good impression on her employer. Otherwise, the girl didn't know what to do. Her life had never been sluggish, but lately things had gotten quite bad. Some kind of black streak with no end and no edge. But Sarah was not discouraged. She knew for sure that at her young age one must move forward. A black streak is followed by a white one. You just have to do something about it. Besides the fact that she did not whine and did not feel sorry for herself, the girl tried her best. She called all the companies in the city, looking for vacancies, even thinking about part-time work. Accountants, as it turned out, were required few, but much more often flashed vacancies for cleaners. What to do? If you cannot get a job in the profession, you will have to take any job. Money will not earn itself. You can't expect help. but you have to live. When Sarah was fired from the colony, where she had worked in the accounting department for almost 3 years, they tried to console her. "Well, you're still very young," exhorted Susan Smith, the head of the personnel department. "You'll easily find a new position. Who's to be laid off but you? Not Laura, she's raising a son on her own. Or Dolores. She's in her 60s. Who'd hire her at that age? And you're still a child. At least you can live with your parents. They're young and strong. It won't be a big deal if you're out of work for a few months. Get some rest." Susan Smith had no idea how Sarah was doing, but the girl didn't even try to explain anything to her. She knew it was useless. The penal colony where Sarah worked had been downsized, and now the institution did not need 3 accountants at once. Someone in the payroll department had to be fired. She, the youngest, was chosen. Susan Smith said that in case of emergency, the young girl could live with her parents for a while. She gave as an example her daughter, the same age as Sarah, who was studying at the institute, did not work and lived in the care of her mother and father. But Sarah's situation was completely different. True, she didn't talk about it much. Not that she was ashamed. The girl somehow managed to contrast herself with her own mother from an early age. Mother on her own, Sarah apart. But she just wanted to start a new life. It was one thing to present herself in the eyes of new acquaintances as just a girl from the village, and another the daughter of an alcoholic. Sarah was well aware that this fact of biography would definitely affect her image and reputation, and she tried to avoid it. As long as she could remember, her mother always drank. At first, the girl thought that this is normal, quite natural phenomenon. Sarah simply did not know anything else. But as she grew up, she looked around carefully and realized that it was not so. The other children lived in full families, wore new clothes, ate well, were looked after, given gifts. They were taken to the city for rides and movies, and Sarah was literally surviving. Fortunately, a kind-hearted neighbor, Pamela, looked after the girl a little. The old woman often treated Sarah to soup or called her home to warm up when her mother, drunk, closed the door and the girl could not get home. Pamela periodically tried to reason neighbor Amber, "How can you behave like this? You wouldn't get in trouble. Get smart before it's too late," but Sarah's mother either listened to these admonitions in silence or answered the old lady rudely. At such moments, Sarah was very ashamed and offended for Pamela. The girl had such a mother drank in the company of village alcoholics like her. The whole crowd often gathered at their house. They would party until morning, making noise, arguing, sometimes even fighting. It really scared Sarah, and she hid in the attic. There she had her own corner, a mattress, a plaid, a pillow, a few books given by neighbors, a flashlight. The girl did not feel safe in the room. Sometimes the mother tried to take up her mind. She even got a job then as a cleaner in the cow shed, then as an assistant in the canteen. The woman was welcomed, knowing that she had a daughter and feeling sorry for the girl. At first, during such periods, Sarah rested. She was reassured that everything would be all right. The house would be clean, and simple but delicious home-cooked food would appear on the table. Amber even paid attention to her daughter, took an interest in her life, made plans together. Sometimes she promised to take Sarah to the city, to the movies or amusement parks, but it never came to that. The mother snapped again, and everything returned night drinking, complete indifference to her daughter. Sarah grew up neglected. Sarah didn't know her father, but she hoped he was a prosperous, good man, though there was little chance of that. Her mother had been very beautiful when she was young, until she started drinking heavily. Sarah had seen old pictures of her. Maybe she had a great pure love then, the fruit of which was Sarah herself. Of course, the girl asked her mother about her father, but she invariably replied that she herself did not know who he was. She had a busy, fun life then to memorize and keep track of such little things. Fortunately, Amber had no more children. The first birth was complicated. Sarah grew up without siblings. Once she wanted a kindred, understanding person next to her together perhaps would be easier and more fun. But then the girl realized that all for the best. It is not worth her mother to become a large family if she does not follow one child. Sarah had never known her father and realized that she would never know. Not knowing allowed her to hope. The girl dreamed that the second half of the genes inherited from her father turned out to be more successful than the inheritance from her mother. Sayings like "the apple doesn't fall far from the tree" frightened her. Was she destined to be like Amber? But no way. Teachers, seeing the efforts of a child from a disadvantaged family, tried to support the student. Someone studied with her additionally. Someone bought some aids for the girl with his own money. Many people were interested in Sarah's fate. Once, when Sarah was finishing the 8th grade, she was summoned by the principal. Sarah went to the office, causing awe and terror in most school children, completely calm. The girl's conscience was clear, and Nicole was a balanced, calm woman who always wished Sarah only good. "Come in, sit down." The principal smiled broadly and offered the girl to sit in the chair opposite her. That day they talked about Sarah's future. Nicole had suggested a wonderful option to enroll after 9th grade at a school in the city. Some friend of hers worked at the institution who could arrange a place in the dormitory for a country girl. "Just imagine you'll live in the city, in a clean room to study. Then you'll find a job. Will you get married? Everything depends on you now. Will you manage? You'll have a good, happy life," Nicole said. "Scared of hardship? You realize you have no prospects in our village. Look at your mother." Of course, Sarah would manage. She had no doubt about it. The prospects were breathtaking. A bright future loomed ahead. She wouldn't have to live forever in a cold, dirty house, where some unpleasant people, her mother's companions, were always crowding around. Sarah was sincerely grateful to the director for such an offer and participation in her destiny, and decided that as soon as she became successful, wealthy, and she did not imagine otherwise, she would return to the village and give Nicole a mink coat. At that time, Sarah associated this item of closet with wealth and luxury. The year flew by. Sarah studied very hard, preparing for college. Her teachers helped her as much as they could. The mother, while she behaved as usual, brought friends to the house, did not work. The woman lived and walked on the allowance that the state paid her as a single mother. The whole village collected Sarah for college. Her neighbors gave her clothes from their grown children, provided her with money for the first time, and wished her a happy journey. "Find yourself a nice guy from a nice family," Grandma Pamela insisted. "And don't come back here. There's no more life for you here." Sarah smiled. She was going to accomplish everything on her own, not with the help of some guy from a good family. A new life was just around the corner. The realization of that fact was exhilarating. It even made her dizzy. Then school started. Sarah chose accounting. Nicole advised, saying that Sarah has enough intelligence and accountants are needed in every organization, so the girl would not stay without a job. Sarah couldn't believe what was happening to her for a long time. She lived in a clean, spacious room with 2 roommates, ate well in the dining hall, received a scholarship, which she could spend on clothes and textbooks, and studied. Sarah gave herself completely to her studies. She had to become not just an accountant, but the best accountant. She had no margin for error. Sarah made warm friendships with her classmates and roommates. But from student parties, the girl invariably refused. There was nothing wrong with having fun on the weekend, of course. But the noise, the clinking of glasses, drinking, laughter, all this caused unpleasant associations. Sarah involuntarily drew parallels with what was happening at home, and nausea came to her throat. The girl vaguely realized that she had been traumatized by a difficult childhood, and something had to be done about it. But not now. The main thing now was to study and find a good job, so that she would never return to the village again. She had nowhere to go back to. 3 years of study flew by unnoticed. The girl matured, got used to the city. She was considered the best student of the course. And that's why the teachers helped her with employment. The place, of course, was not the most prestigious, a penal colony on the outskirts of the city. But she, a girl with no experience, was taken, as they say, right off the street. And the salary was promised to be stable, not very large, but with quarterly and annual bonuses. This money was enough for rent, transportation, and food. Sarah didn't dream of more. The girl rented a small apartment near the new place of work, and a new stage in her life began. Sarah still could not believe that she had become so mature and independent. How wonderful it is to be a child. The bad. Children are defenseless. They are totally dependent on their parents. With mom and dad, it's just a matter of luck. Sarah wasn't lucky. But now she thought. Now the girl was quite consciously enjoying her new position. She was a correctional officer, an adult, independent. Sarah couldn't believe what was happening to her. Her life would be whatever she wanted it to be. Sarah loved her job. At first, she was put behind the cash register. She didn't have much to do here. Except for the end of the month, when all the staff of the institution lined up for salaries and bonuses. On such days, she even had to stay late. It was here, near the cash register, that Sarah met Ben. The girl often saw this guy in the building. She liked his smile, so warm, open. He himself was short, skinny, not particularly noticeable, but the smile and the gray eyes seemed to be sly. And they definitely attracted attention. The girl knew that the guy worked as a driver, saw how he gave rides to the colony staff. He caused her some previously unexplored feelings. Sarah could not explain to herself what it was. She only liked to meet this man in the corridor. He always looked at her carefully, studying her, interested. And this look gave Sarah a pleasant chill in her stomach and made her palms sweat, an inexplicable reaction of her body. One day, a handsome guy met Sarah in the hallway. In his hands was a bouquet of beautiful flowers. It was later that the girl found out that he was tearing them from the flower. The guy smiled. His cheeks showed charming dimples. For the most beautiful girl in the world. Sarah felt a wave of warmth. The girl silently accepted the flowers. She even lost her voice in surprise. But the guy's eloquence was enough for two. "You are incredibly beautiful," Ben complimented her. "And yet quiet, modest. My kind of girl. Would you mind if I took you for a walk?" "I'd love to." Sarah was too hasty. At that moment, she felt the happiest in the world. "Then give me the address." "I know you live around here, don't you? 8 o'clock sharp. I'll be waiting for you at the door." And he did. Sarah came out before the appointed time, but Ben was already sitting on the bench, his long legs stretched far forward in his sneakers. That evening, they both walked all around the neighborhood eating ice cream, laughing, talking about everything in the world. Ben was a great conversationalist with a well-tongued tongue. Sarah, always a little stiff, felt at ease and free with him. It was like magic. The girl told Sarah about her childhood. He had a way of being sincere. Probably because he didn't hide anything himself. Calmly said that he grew up in an orphanage and was not the most calm and obedient child, even in juvenile detention for theft. But then he got smart, studied to be a driver, found a job. He worked at a bakery. True, there he was framed by more experienced, clever colleagues, set up in such a way that Ben's shift lost money for products. Why, it was easy to think I was the guy, he grinned. A stint in juvie and orphanage. You couldn't find a better candidate for the role of a scapegoat. That's how I ended up back in juvie. "I don't get it. Sarah, you had to do time again?" "Yeah, but my time wasn't up yet." "What do you mean?" "It's like this. Didn't you know that?" "I thought you did. I'm a prisoner in a penal colony, serving my sentence. It's not a heavy sentence, so I work for the colony, I get a little money. The locals even let me into town, like today, for example." Sarah couldn't believe what she'd just heard. So this nice, friendly guy is a prisoner. What difference does that make, really? Ben is still the same charming, smiling, intelligent, very pleasant conversationalist. And Sarah obviously likes him. And the fact that he's in a penal colony, well, who doesn't? A guy was framed, and there's no one to stand up for him, just like there's no one to stand up for her. And in general, she and Ben have a lot in common: a difficult childhood and the need to make their own way in this life. Sarah decided that Ben's status didn't mean anything to her. The only thing that matters is that he's a good man, and he is. Even the staff trusts him. They let him go out on the town. "I've only got 4 months left on my sentence," Ben said. "Then I'll get out, get a job, and start a new life. I have a lot of plans." Ben and Sarah started dating. The girl fell in love with the cheerful, charming guy more and more every day. With him, she felt beautiful, needed, loved, special, a very unfamiliar, but very pleasant feeling. Ben tried to help Sarah in everything. For example, he looked for people who had to sign her papers. He drove her wherever she needed to go, carried heavy folders for her from the archives, brought her delicious buns from the canteen. He was always there for her. From time to time, Ben was released in the city, and then he took the girl to the movies, cafes, theater. Sometimes they just wandered the streets, talking about all sorts of topics. However, with Ben, it was pleasant to be quiet. 4 months went by quickly. Ben was released and moved in with Sarah. Where else would he go? It was impossible to live in the apartment, which he had received as an orphan when he was released from the orphanage. It was in an emergency building, from which the bricks were slowly falling out. It was scary to even go in there. Sarah was happy about this turn of events. Now she and Ben lived together like a real family. The guy turned out to be a handyman. He repaired a leaky faucet, changed a light switch, pasted wallpaper. Any job he could do it with his deft hands. And how did Ben cook? The smell of his fried potatoes and mushrooms even made Sarah dizzy. The only thing that marred the idyll was that Ben couldn't find a job. In the morning when Sarah ran away to the office, Ben also left the house and ran to interviews until the evening. But when she came back from work, she found out that another day had been wasted. "They won't hire me anywhere," the guy shook his head sadly. "After all, 2 convictions and for theft. It's a stigma on me now. I can't get away from it." "I guess you'll find something," Sarah reassured him uncertainly. "Of course we'll get through this." But as time went on, nothing changed. Sometimes Ben had some money from somewhere, like he found a temporary part-time job. He'd unload a truck, then he'd spend a couple days at the market, then he'd work at a construction site. He'd spend it all on booze and snacks. Sarah was worried. Ben, the joker and the soul of the company, liked to have fun too much. He had a lot of friends with whom he often disappeared in bars and cafes. Sarah stayed home because she was tired after work. And she had to get up early in the morning, not like Ben. When the guy had no money, he lived on Sarah's salary. She kept silent, afraid of offending her lover, of spoiling their warm, trusting relationship. But the relationship was somehow imperceptibly changing. She and Ben had clearly drifted apart. Sometimes they couldn't even say a word to each other for an entire evening. No, the girl would have loved to talk to her lover. Sarah was still very attracted to him, whereas he had clearly grown cold to the girl. There was no longer the admiration in Ben's gaze that had once so enticed Sarah. When the girl tried to find out what was wrong, Ben became angry. "Why are you picking at my soul? Can't you see that? I'm going through a rough patch in my life. I've got to prove I'm not a criminal, find a job. And then there's you. But we don't spend enough time together. You're out with your friends all the time? I'm alone." "You should have fun too," Ben said. "You've got a lot of coworkers. You have a job and a paycheck. I'm out with my friends, maybe relieving stress. Do you think it's easy to feel second class? Everyone thinks being an ex-con means you're a lost cause. But they understand me and accept me for who I am. I understand and accept you." One day Sarah came home early and overheard Ben on the phone. He was talking to some woman, calling her Jenny and showering her with compliments. It was very similar to the way he had behaved with her in the first few months after meeting her. Sarah felt an almost physical pain in her chest, but still mustered up the courage to enter the room. Ben was a little embarrassed at first, but then angrily went into the kitchen where he calmly ended the conversation, only to return to the room. "What was that all about?" Sarah asked, trying to make her voice sound as firm as possible. "It was nothing in particular. This girl, I met her in a bar. Her dad's the shop foreman. I'm trying to get a job, you might say." That explanation satisfied Sarah at the time, probably because she really wanted to believe in this logical version. She just needed an excuse. Ben's job didn't work out after all. Despite everything, Sarah still loved Ben and hoped that things would work out between them. It is necessary just to survive this difficult period, and everything will be fine. But the black streak in the girl's life did not think to end. One morning, the chief accountant invited everyone to a meeting and said that there were going to be cutbacks, including the settlement department, where Sarah works. The girl tensed, of course, but she felt out of danger. Sarah worked for 2 people. She coped with all the cases perfectly. Besides, she was young. There's an older woman in the department. That she was a cousin of the boss, Sarah did not realize at the time. Sarah was not even alarmed when she was called to the HR department. Accountants and HR people have a lot of things in common. Nothing suspicious. But the supervisor informed Sarah of her dismissal. That evening, the girl, barely reaching home, collapsed on the sofa and burst into tears. What injustice! Why should she do this? She thought. Colleagues all day cheered Sarah, assured that she will easily and quickly find a job with an even higher salary. They said that everything was for the best, but they knew absolutely nothing about Sarah's life and situation. She can't be out of work for even 2 weeks. There's no way she could find a new job in that short a time. Business? Ben shook his head sadly. What are we going to live on now? I don't know, Sarah shrugged. You're not making any progress. It's quiet. Who needs an ex-convict? Yeah, that's how we got here, Ben sighed. We'll start looking at vacancies tomorrow, Sarah said, sobbing. I'll find something. I'm sure I will. I don't know. Jobs are hard to come by in the city right now, Ben was right. Sarah had heard that many times, but she hadn't cared about it before. After all, the girl worked in prison. She was absolutely satisfied with everything. Who knew how to pay the rent? Ben continued to lament. It's getting close to the deadline. Are they going to kick us out? No, I have a little savings. Sarah shook her head. She was saving a little from each paycheck, saving for a vacation by the sea. She dreamed of spending a romantic vacation with Ben in a southern resort town. But now this sum will have to pay off the landlord, so that at least not to be without a roof over their heads. Oh, that's good, Ben said. I didn't know that. Because it was a surprise, Sarah smiled sadly. I have the money under my mattress in a blue book. What now? All the next day, Sarah tried to find a job. They sent out resumes to companies in the city. What if she got lucky? What if someone responds? The tired girl returned home only in the evening. Her legs were buzzing and she had a headache. But Sarah knew she'd done all she could today. Ben was gone. He must have gone out with his buddies to a bar or a club or something. Sarah didn't understand how he could be so careless about the future. For her, not having a job was a disaster. And him? He didn't worry, he lived and had fun, enjoyed the little things. Maybe it was that easygoing nature that made Sarah fall in love with Ben. Something was wrong in the apartment. Sarah felt it at once, but only then realized what it was. There were fewer shoes around the doorstep. Ben had left in one pair of sneakers. That was understandable. But where had the other two pairs gone? And where was the laptop that Sarah had bought on credit? It always stood on the living room table. The girl, obeying a sudden impulse, opened Ben's clothes closet. There were no jackets, no pants, no sweaters. Slowly, the bitter truth began to reach Sarah. Ben had left, packed his things, and not just his own. He'd taken his laptop too, and disappeared, without even explaining anything to her. Sarah dialed his number, but all she heard in response was a short beep. It looked like Ben had blacklisted her or changed her number altogether. But why? He must have met someone else. Maybe he'd even gone to the same hottie Sarah had overheard talking to him. It hurts, but it's understandable. The only thing I don't understand is why Ben left without saying goodbye, and without saying anything, just ran away. Did what was between them mean nothing to him? The problems with her job suddenly faded into the background. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt a searing, tugging pain in her chest. She couldn't hold back the emotions that had come over her. She burst into uncontrollable sobs, which, as it turned out, had even more unpleasant circumstances. It turned out that Ben had taken the money from under the mattress, the very money that Sarah had planned to spend on the rent. The rent was due in a week. If she didn't, the landlord would kick her out on the street. And go where? Sarah had absolutely nowhere to go. She sat on the floor with her hands on her knees and thought. All sorts of thoughts collided and jumbled in her head. Ben, who was he? An unhappy orphanage boy with a hard fate, or a common criminal who could never be reformed? Had he ever loved her? Or was he just using her? And she, naive fool, didn't understand anything. Would the landlord give her an extension on the payment? Maybe he'd take pity if she explained the situation to him. Or, on the contrary, immediately kick her out the door as an insolvent tenant. Would there be a job for her in this big, uncomfortable city? Sarah quickly tired of her heavy thoughts and fell asleep on the floor in the hallway. There was no strength to crawl to the couch. In the morning, the girl washed her face, combed her hair, ate breakfast, and went to look for a job again. Soon Sarah realized that it was almost unreal to get a job in her profession now, and began to look at other vacancies. Okay, she'd have time to become a great accountant. For now, she had to find any place, as long as it paid money. Sometimes the girl was invited for an interview. They promised to call her back, but never did. And soon Sarah stopped believing these assurances. She searched hard, but to no avail. She had no money left at all. The girl stretched the last packet of groats and a loaf of bread and had no idea what to do next. Her situation was becoming more and more desperate. That's when the call came from the cleaning company. Sarah had been to an interview with them about a week ago. They didn't hire her then, but now there was a vacancy for a cleaning assistant, and the girl got a call back. The woman from the HR department asked Sarah to come in the morning with her documents. Only she warned her not to be late, because they didn't want any non-committal employees. And it should happen that Sarah forgot to charge her phone the day before. In the morning, the alarm clock did not wake the girl in time. She woke up on her own. She looked at her watch and was stunned. And now Sarah flew to the bus stop, not noticing everything around her. Just to make it, just to get to the office on time. She needed this job so badly. Sarah walked hurriedly down the sidewalk. Suddenly, a strange sight caught her attention. A pale, frightened old woman was sitting on the sidewalk. There was horror in her eyes. The old woman was struggling to breathe, a hoarse squeak escaping from her lungs. Sarah stopped, looking around. She should call for help, but there was no one nearby. It wasn't rush hour, so there was no one to help this woman but Sarah. But if she's late for her interview, she's out of a job. Wouldn't you? But Sarah couldn't pass up an old woman in desperate need of help. How can you leave someone in this position? What's wrong with you? The girl squatted down in front of the woman and looked into her face. Sarah ... she said with difficulty. Sarah had never seen people's lips so blue before. An ambulance? She asked. The old woman nodded. Sarah dialed the ambulance number, explained the situation to the dispatcher, and gave the address. The deed was done, but she couldn't leave the woman alone on the sidewalk and decided to wait for the ambulance to arrive. Sarah was hopelessly late for her interview. She could forget about the job, which meant there was nowhere to rush and nothing to worry about. "What's your name?" the girl asked, sitting down next to the old woman on the sidewalk. "Deborah," she exhaled. "Thank you, sweetheart. Don't ever leave. I'll sit here with you. Please, please, I'm afraid to be alone." "Were you in a hurry?" The woman spoke intermittently, taking hoarse breaths every now and then. But it was obvious that she needed companionship now. It distracted her a little, prevented her from panicking. "It's nothing." Sarah waved her hand. "No, it's important." The old woman struggled and tried to smile. "I saw on your face that you were in a hurry." "Yes, it's not an interesting story. I'll tell you later, if you promise to get better quickly." "It happens to me. Not for a while, though. My heart hurts. I need a shot. Well, they know in the ambulance, and everything will be fine." Just then, a yellow car with a horn honked. Two uniformed men got out and approached the old woman. Sarah stepped aside, letting the specialists do their work. They asked Susan Smith a few questions and actually gave her an injection. Within moments, the old woman's skin color began to take on a normal hue, and most importantly, her lips went from blue to a normal pink color. Deborah was getting better before her eyes. It was like magic. Doctors are a bit of magicians after all. Sarah thought the ambulance would take the old lady away after such a terrible attack. What's a hospital without a hospital? But the paramedics got into their car and drove off. And Deborah, smiling broadly, approached the surprised Sarah. "Don't you have to go to the hospital?" the girl asked. "What did I forget there?" The injection was given. The attack was relieved. "Now I will go to the outpatient clinic to my cardiologist. He will choose pills, and I will again live peacefully for several years. It's a good thing I'm lucky I came across you, baby. Otherwise I'd be lying here on the asphalt, no people around. Only cars passing by on the road. They don't even look around. It was an accident. I should have been here earlier. I was just late today because of my alarm clock. Now I'm glad I did. By the way, you promised that if I felt better, you'd tell me your interesting story," Deborah reminded me. "Remember, now you're in no hurry." Sarah smiled. "I'm in no hurry now. But there's really nothing interesting about it. Let's check it out." And Sarah told Deborah about her life, even mentioned her childhood, so that the old woman understood the girl has no home. She has nowhere to go. Deborah listened attentively to every word, sometimes sighing sadly, sometimes shaking her head. "Yes, you've had a hard life," she summarized after listening to Sarah's confusing story. She didn't even understand why it had happened. "But you say you suddenly felt better, and then I look at you with such understanding, even regretted, did not say anything. The main thing is working hands and feet. I'll find a new job somehow, don't doubt it. but it's hard for such a young girl in a big city all alone. Without support, Sarah smiled sadly. "It's my fault," Deborah said thoughtfully. "You lost your job because of me, didn't you?" "No way." Sarah shook her hands. "Don't even think about it." "I am thinking about it," she said, "and I've already thought of something." And Deborah suddenly made Sarah a completely unexpected offer. She invited her to live in her apartment. "Until things get better, no problem." "But I'm uncomfortable," Sarah admitted. "Uncomfortable sleeping on the ceiling? The blanket falls down?" Parried the old woman suddenly, and then added seriously, "Honey, you actually saved my life. To give shelter to a kind girl in need of help, how hard can it be? And I myself will have more fun with you." I was all alone and alone. And so Sarah came to live with Deborah. The old woman gave her a whole room of her cozy 2-room apartment, the brightest and most beautiful, with windows overlooking the park. Deborah's offer came in handy, because the very next day after they met, the owner of the apartment asked Sarah to move out. She couldn't pay the rent, and the landlord immediately found new tenants. Sarah was given 24 hours to pack. The girl managed much sooner. She packed her belongings in a single suitcase and went to Deborah's house in the evening of the same day. The lonely old woman was obviously sincerely glad to have a lodger. Deborah behaved with Sarah in such a way that she soon stopped feeling awkward and constrained. Yes, it was an unusual situation, but it was good for everyone. Sarah had a roof over her head. And Deborah? She wasn't lonely anymore. She had someone to talk to watch TV with, to discuss news and recipes, to share her worries and joys. That meant a lot to an elderly person. Sarah, of course, tried to help Deborah in everything, but she herself clearly liked to take care of the girl. The old woman often cooked something tasty for her. She baked pancakes, fried pies on a griddle, made delicious stews of chicken and vegetables. No one had ever tried so hard for Sarah. Sometimes the girl even had tears in her eyes. How pleasant it is, such care. Sarah found a job after all. 3 weeks after the move, she got a job as a sales clerk in a neighboring store. The experience of working in the cash register at this place came in handy. When the girl came home, there was always the smell of something delicious: pies, homemade borscht. Deborah immediately led her to the kitchen, assuring her that a tired girl should definitely eat and rest. Sarah did not object. The girl often felt as if she had known Deborah all her life. She was surprisingly easy to be with, as if it was a normal thing to live with a complete stranger, a stranger in fact. After getting a job, Sarah tried to offer Deborah money to rent a room, but she flatly refused. "Oh, really? Are you like a niece or a granddaughter to me now? There's no way I'm taking money from you, and don't make it up. You'd better save it. Maybe gradually you'll have enough to buy your own place." Over time, Sarah learned Deborah's sad story. The old woman realized why she was alone in her old age. It was really very sad, scary even. Deborah was born in the village to a large family. She was the eldest of 4 sisters. When the girl was 10 years old, her mother died. Her father soon remarried. So into the house came the stepmother, as evil, cold and demanding as in the old fairy tales. She had 2 children, a daughter and a son, the same age as Deborah's younger sisters. This woman immediately disliked Deborah as the oldest and, understandably, a stranger. Her father's wife knew that Deborah saw and noticed everything, and how her stepmother chose the best bits for her children and gave her stepdaughters the leftovers, and how she was always complaining to Papa Gordon about the ill-mannered girls, and how she slowly dragged Deborah's own mother's few pieces of jewelry into her jewelry box. That was particularly hurtful for some reason. Stepmother forced her eldest stepdaughter, Sarah, to work from dawn to dusk, scrubbing floors, cooking, caring for the younger ones, cleaning the livestock. With her arrival in the house for the girl ended childhood. She no longer ran with her friends on the street, did not play with her favorite toys. Talika studied and worked on the household. Instead of gratitude for her help and work, the girl received from her stepmother only reproaches. The bed is not so made, and the borscht is not salty, and the child is unattended, fell off the stool, and hit through her teeth. The woman talked to Sarah, called her a girl, and sometimes even allowed herself to hit the girl, then on the cheek, then on the cheek, then on the head, then on the back. The stepmother was tough to deal with. Sarah was shocked at first. Her mother never laid a finger on any of them, always explained everything with words and here. And then the girl somehow got used to this state of affairs and accepted it. even if Sarah tried to complain to her father, but he was completely on the side of the stepmother. She had already managed to explain to her husband that this is just a method of education, effective and efficient. I do not want to raise children lazy and inept. That's what I'm trying to do, she said. And the fact that Sarah grew up as a quiet girl did not exclude fears. That's the 10th thing. The main thing, she knew how to obey and work on the household. As time went on, Sarah grew up, became a teenage girl. She did not do well in school, despite her natural abilities. Earlier, before her mother's death, she was an excellent student. She was especially good at the exact sciences. But now the girl had almost no time for lessons and studies. Sometimes her stepmother wouldn't let her stepdaughter go to school at all. This happened if there were a lot of household chores or needed to look after the younger ones. But met on the girl's way a kind, caring person, school math teacher Gordon. All teachers saw how hard it was for his student. But this man, a frontline soldier and father of 5 children, did not want to stand aside. He had some acquaintances in the city boarding school for gifted children. He begged them to take an enabled girl who was in a difficult situation. When the teacher told me about it, I was happy at first, Deborah recalled. But then I thought about my stepmother and realized that it wouldn't work. She would never let me leave home. How could I be left without a free maid all of a sudden? But Gordon talked to Deborah's father, explained what prospects awaited the girl in the city, and he gave the go-ahead. Deborah left home at 15 and never went back. Life at the boarding school was good. In the morning, the children went to classes, after them to the canteen, where a delicious lunch was waiting for them. Then there was free time, during which they could walk, rest, and of course do homework. Deborah was finally able to play, socialize with peers, and quietly do homework. At first, the girl lagged behind the class. The lack of opportunity to learn properly earlier was the influence, but Gordon warned that it will be so. He advised to study especially hard at first, and assured that capable Deborah will quickly catch up with the rest. And so it was. After the new year, the girl became one of the best students in the class. See how much we have in common. Deborah smiled at Sarah. I too had to leave home, literally run away from my cruel stepmother and indifferent father. I too had to learn on my own, to make my own way in this life. Ended childhood. She no longer ran with her friends on the street, did not play with her favorite toys. Talika studied and worked on the household. Instead of gratitude for her help and work, the girl received from her stepmother only reproaches. The bed is not so made, and the borscht is not salty, and the child is unattended. Fell off the stool and hit through her teeth. The woman talked to Sarah, called her a girl, and sometimes even allowed herself to hit the girl, then on the cheek, then on the cheek, then on the head, then on the back. The stepmother was tough to deal with. Sarah was shocked at first. Her mother never laid a finger on any of them, always explained everything with words, and here. And then the girl somehow got used to this state of affairs and accepted it. Even if Sarah tried to complain to her father, but he was completely on the side of the stepmother. She had already managed to explain to her husband that this is just a method of education, effective and efficient. I do not want to raise children lazy, inept. That's what I'm trying to do, she said. And the fact that Sarah grew up as a quiet girl did not exclude fears. That's the 10th thing. The main thing, she knew how to obey and work on the household. As time went on, Sarah grew up, became a teenage girl. She did not do well in school, despite her natural abilities. Earlier, before her mother's death, she was an excellent student. She was especially good at the exact sciences. But now the girl had almost no time for lessons and studies. Sometimes her stepmother wouldn't let her stepdaughter go to school at all. This happened if there were a lot of household chores or needed to look after the younger ones. But met on the girl's way a kind, caring person, school math teacher Gordon. All teachers saw how hard it was for his student. But this man, a frontline soldier and father of 5 children, did not want to stand aside. He had some acquaintances in the city boarding school for gifted children. He begged them to take an enabled girl who was in a difficult situation. When the teacher told me about it, I was happy at first, Deborah recalled, but then I thought about my stepmother and realized that it wouldn't work. She would never let me leave home. How could I be left without a free maid all of a sudden? But Gordon talked to Deborah's father, explained what prospects awaited the girl in the city, and he gave the go-ahead. Deborah left home at 15 and never went back. Life at the boarding school was good. In the morning, the children went to classes, after them to the canteen, where a delicious lunch was waiting for them. Then there was free time, during which they could walk, rest, and of course do homework. Deborah was finally able to play, socialize with peers, and quietly do homework. At first, the girl lagged behind the class. The lack of opportunity to learn properly earlier was the influence, but Gordon warned that it will be so. He advised to study especially hard at first, and assured that capable Deborah will quickly catch up with the rest. And so it was. After the new year, the girl became one of the best students in the class. See how much we have in common. Deborah smiled at Sarah. I too had to leave home, literally run away from my cruel stepmother and indifferent father. I too had to learn on my own to make my own way in this life. After boarding school, Deborah easily entered the university. She was given a dormitory. The fragile, beautiful girl chose the profession of an engineer. She graduated from the institute with honors. She got a job in a design bureau, from which she immediately received a small apartment as a young, promising employee. It was easier back then, with housing for young professionals. Deborah sighed. Is it more difficult for you now? So the girl stayed in the city. Now she was a real engineer. At work, Deborah was respected for her hard work, keen mind, and willingness to help others. After a few years, she became head of the department. I thought I was going to live like this for the rest of my life, Deborah said. I decided to devote myself to my work. I liked that kind of life without children in the family. I didn't want that at the time. I studied very hard as a child. I thought I had done my fair share. Only fate had it differently. Deborah often flew to New York for work. This time she was sent for training. The woman loved such business trips. They perfectly diluted gray everyday life, gave new emotions and impressions. After the seminar, Deborah decided to walk around the city. She liked these wide, crowded streets, so spacious, so lively, not at all like their small, quiet town. Deborah walked slowly along the river embankment, looking at the boats and pleasure boats with dressed-up tourists. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, painting everything around her an incredible yellow-pink color. It was at that moment that Chris approached her. A young, tall man with a charming smile and warm gaze immediately introduced himself. He apologized and showered Deborah with compliments, calling her a mysterious beauty, a queen, a beautiful stranger. Of course, by the time she was 45, Deborah had been in relationships, and in more than one. And she'd learned to take compliments. But then something suddenly fluttered inside. Chris, seeing it, became enthusiastic, glowing. Deborah was pleased to realize that her presence alone made this man so happy. They took a long walk. That evening, Chris turned out to be talkative. And it was very useful, because in the conversation there were no awkward pauses and hiccups. He amused Deborah, making her laugh at his jokes. After a couple of hours, it seemed to her that she had known this man all her life. She did not want to part with him at all. That's why Deborah didn't come back to the room alone. The concierge looked at us like that. Deborah smiled. What was the big deal? We were both adults. Who cares? The next morning, Deborah found Chris in the room, as well as her wallet with money, gold jewelry, and even a few almost new dresses. Everything fell into place. Chris had just grasped her trust, said a lot of things, waited until the new acquaintance relaxed, and was so. Deborah did not report him. It would look too unattractive in this story. She met a man on the street, brought him to her room, and he turned out to be a common criminal. Reputation would be seriously damaged. You see, that's a coincidence. Deborah smiled at Susan. Both you and I were fooled by a man. It happens. Only mine not only took my valuables, but left something behind without even realizing it. A month after the ugly story, Deborah realized she was expecting a baby. There was no doubt about who the father was, the same Chris from New York. Deborah didn't know what to do. On the one hand, the child she could pull and alone would be no worse than a married woman. Her apartment was spacious and comfortable. The salary of the head of the engineering department allowed to provide even more than one baby. On the other hand, age. At that time, to give birth at 45 to the first child was considered catastrophically late, although now it does not surprise anyone. And what would people say? Deborah still had strong provincial prejudices about living with an eye on neighbors and acquaintances. And yet the woman made up her mind, realized that this was her last chance to become a mother. She might never get another chance. She had once decided for herself that she would live without children. But realizing that a new life was born under her heart, suddenly desperately wanted to keep this baby. And that's how Deborah got Bill. This guy grew up to be amazing. Attractive, charming, smart. Bill had many talents. He drew beautifully, started reading early. He definitely had a knack for math. Even from an early age, the boy was fond of sports, tried many things: soccer, basketball, karate, skiing, hockey. Deborah supported all of her son's hobbies. Bill was a joy to her. She had never imagined that it was possible to love someone so much. The boy reciprocated his mother. He helped around the house, made surprises and gifts just like that, without a reason. Time flew by very quickly. Deborah went on a well-deserved vacation. Bill grew up and went to study, as his mother once did, for an engineer. At the university, he started hiking. The department had a section for students. Wherever they went, they rafted on the river, went to the forest for a week, and went down into the caves. On that fateful day, a group of students went into the mountains. Deborah's heart had been troubled for days before the hike. There was no doubt in her mind that Bill was an excellent climber. Her son is agile, trained from childhood, smart, will not make mistakes. But not everything depends on people. There are unforeseen circumstances. The mountains were a 3-hour drive from the city. The students were going to conquer a particularly difficult peak. The day before, Bill had excitedly told his mother how he had long dreamed of climbing the peak. In the afternoon, Deborah somehow got wound up. A friend came over. Then they went shopping together. Distracted, Deborah even stopped worrying. That evening, that phone call rang. Deborah, looking at the phone, froze. For some reason, she didn't want to pick up the phone. Something told her she was about to get some bad news, and so it was. A group of students had been caught in a mudslide down the mountain. Several people were killed, many injured. 2 boys, including Deborah's son, went missing. And endless hard days dragged on for the 2 elderly mothers. Rescuers spent a long time removing the rubble. Among the rocks and dirt, they found the body of one of the missing boys. Bill, the other one, was never found. You realize there's no chance the man in uniform explained to Deborah. If he was alive, he would have made himself known by now. He stayed under the rubble. It's physically impossible to make out everything. Bill was recognized dead, but for 3 years Deborah could not accept this state of affairs. She never saw the body, so she could not believe what had happened. So Deborah lived with a faint hope for a miracle. The old woman showed Sarah pictures of her son. From them smiled an attractive young man, tall, athletic, with blue eyes. Even from these pictures, it was clear how energetic and cheerful he was. It's hard even for me to believe that such a man no longer exists. Deborah sighed as she looked at the photos. She smiled too, and she often said, "Maybe we'll see him again." "My intuition tells me he's alive," the woman shook her head. "Perhaps I just want to believe it, and yet I feel that he is alive out there somewhere." Once a year, on the day of the tragedy, Deborah would visit the place where it had happened. She sat there at the foot of the mountain, admired the scenery, and remembered her Bill. She would leave flowers at the site of the tragedy for those guys who died under the rubble. After hearing this story, Sarah felt even more for Deborah. She felt sorry for the older woman who had never been able to come to terms with her loss. But Deborah's resilience, her belief that Bill was alive, both admired and caused a pang of sadness in her heart. A 1.5 years passed imperceptibly. Sarah lived with Deborah and worked as a saleswoman, but she wanted more. Did she study accounting for nothing? So Sarah was always looking for a job in her specialty. And one day luck smiled on her. The girl got a call and was invited to an interview at the factory. An accountant was required. Sarah went to the meeting in a calm mood. Sarah had already been to so many interviews that she could write a book for beginners. If she didn't get the job, it was okay. She had a job, a roof over her head. Not like a 1.5 years ago, when she suddenly found herself in a desperate situation. She's fine now. But they hired her and told her right away that she was a good fit. They didn't even say, "We'll get back to you." Sarah gasped at first with a rush of emotion. Had her long-held dream come true? Would she really work in her profession in such a big factory and get a good salary? She couldn't wait to share the news with Deborah. Sarah was also given a dormitory at the factory. The building itself was far out of town. Every day you drive back and forth, you get tired, Deborah said. Most of the employees lived in a cottage community nearby. The rest occupied rooms in a comfortable dormitory on the adjoining property. Deborah was happy for the girl. But the news that Sarah would have to move saddened the old woman. "I'm so used to you." I'm going to miss you, she admitted. But I'm happy for you. It's a dream come true. I will come to visit you often, she promised. She understood that she would also miss this cozy apartment and kind landlady. Deborah saved her, offered help in a critical situation, became a really close person for Sarah. The girl will never forget her. A new stage of life began. At work, she had to get into everything anew. She had forgotten a lot of things during her work as a salesman. Sarah made a lot of new acquaintances. Everything was so exciting, so wonderful, so new that the girl could not keep her promise to visit Deborah every weekend. She understood everything and did not take offense. But Sarah made sure to call the old lady every evening, asking about her affairs and sharing the news. Deborah always listened attentively, praised and supported her. Sarah felt strong after these conversations. One day the old lady called Sarah herself. It happened on New Year's Eve, when the town was preparing for the holiday. The girl tensed up a little. She usually called Deborah herself. Suddenly she was the first one to call. Was something wrong? She realized that nothing was wrong as soon as she heard the familiar voice. The always calm Deborah could barely contain her emotions. Bill has been found. The old woman almost shouted into the phone. He's here. He's alive. Sarah could not believe what she heard. Unlike Deborah, she shared the opinion of the rescuers and the police that the boy had not survived. He came home this morning, opened his own key. Can you believe he hasn't lost it in over 4 years? It's a miracle. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. It's incredible, she exclaimed. Yes, it is. As a physicist and a mathematician, I have to admit that there are miracles after all, said Deborah. After all, the chances of salvation for Bill were minimal. What now? Asked a worried Sarah. What's it going to be like now? Well, Bill has so much to do now. He's been declared dead. There's a lot of paperwork to get him back on paper. He's dealing with it. What about me? Sarah asked. I don't want to get in his way. A man needs to rest, get used to everything. You don't know my Bill, Deborah grinned. He's always happy to have visitors. We've had a bunch of his friends at our house since he was a kid. Bill never knew how to relax. Sarah could hardly wait for the weekend. She wanted to see Deborah's son sooner and learn his amazing story. Where was this man for so many years? Why did not give any information about himself? But the girl was worried before the trip, too. Sarah was worried about how this Bill would take her. The girl who had occupied his room for a whole year and a half while he himself had been missing somewhere, perhaps enduring hardship. Deborah opened the door for Sarah. It was as if she had grown younger these days. Her eyes shone with happiness. Hello, come in. Deborah hugged Sarah tightly. The girl gingerly entered the hallway. From the kitchen came voices and laughter. It was Bill's comrades who had come. One of them was with him in the mountains during the mudslide. He had a long convalescence. But he's all right now. He's alive. Come on, don't be shy. Sarah went into the kitchen. There were people sitting around the table. Deborah's friend, 2 guys a little older than Sarah. A smiling girl. On the wide windowsill sat Bill himself. The girl recognized him immediately from the photos. He looked at the guest and smiled. Slightly disheveled blonde hair, tanned face with correct features, clear blue eyes, wide smile. You are the Sarah that Mom saved. The boy easily jumped down from the windowsill and came closer. He scrutinized the woman who entered. Sarah was embarrassed under his gaze, but the guy's proximity was unexpectedly pleasant. But saved. That's a big word for it, the girl replied. And you? You are the man who disappeared 4 years ago. And then suddenly found? Yes, I am. Bill grinned. That's quite a story. You could make a movie. The evening passed quickly. The company was good and warm. Sarah was welcomed. She didn't feel like a stranger, though she saw everyone here, except Deborah and her friend, for the first time. For the first time, Bill told his story to the crowd. Apparently, he had to explain what had happened to him not for the first time, and remembering the past was not very pleasant. But the people close to him wanted to know the story, and the guy told it over and over again. Bill was one of the first in the group to realize that something terrible and inevitable was happening. First, he heard a growing rumble. Then he saw a dark mass coming at them from the top of the mountain. There was nowhere to hide. There was no escape. Their group was just coming up the steep climb. It wasn't hard to run all the way up there. Bill had time to look down. He saw the multicolored bright helmets of his classmates, who had no clue about anything yet. Somewhere far below, a river was winding in the sun. The next instant, Bill was hit by a heavy wave of mud. The boy felt himself being carried downward at a terrifying speed, and then he lost consciousness. Bill woke up in the hospital. He was covered in abrasions and deep cuts. His legs, his arms were broken, his head was shattered. The doctor promised the boy would live. Then he asked him his name. Bill opened his mouth to answer, but suddenly realized he didn't know his own name. He couldn't answer any of the questions. He couldn't remember where he came from or what had happened to him. Had no idea who his parents were. Didn't know anything about himself at all. Everything from before the hospital was strangely erased from his memory. It's amnesia. It happens, the doctor explained. After a brain injury, the memory is bound to come back. But time passed, and the boy still could not remember anything about himself. It frightened him, made him afraid for the future, and for the past too. Who was he suddenly in that life, of which there were no memories? Had he done something terrible, or had something terrible happen to his family and friends? Why did his brain shut off his memory? There's a reason. The guy was in the hospital for months. All this time, doctors and police tried to find his relatives, gave ads in newspapers, sent out an orientation. There was even a story about him on the local news. But no one ever responded. No one is looking for you, it seems, sighed the head doctor, looking at the unusual patient. Are you really such a lonely person in your young years? The boy was silent. He had nothing to answer the doctor. He himself would have given a lot to know the truth about himself. One of the nurses gave the patient a temporary name, Arthur. He reminded her very much of her nephew, whose name was Arthur. The boy agreed. Arthur, so Arthur, what difference does it make? But he felt he really had some other name, and hoped that someday he would be remembered after all. When Bill got a little stronger, the doctor advised him to take a walk around town. He assured him that if he saw something familiar, it could be a trigger for the return of his memory. The boy obediently wandered through the crowded wide streets and greedily looked around. But nothing the local houses, squares, and parks evoked any response. They seemed utterly alien and unfamiliar. And then it was time for Bill to be discharged from the hospital, because he had already made a full recovery. He couldn't be kept in the hospital any longer. So where am I supposed to go? The boy asked the doctor. A social shelter. You can still get a job. People live there for up to 6 months. Then we'll see. Maybe someone will turn up. Just don't give up looking. Bill spent 6 months in a social shelter, worked at the local sawmill, made new friends and comrades. Everyone supported the guy, tried to help him find his relatives. They gave announcements and leaflets on the streets, and so people were interviewed. But these measures still had no results. Bill decided to live in the conditions that fate offered him. He got a job as a janitor, and the Housing and Utilities Department gave him a small, cramped room under the stairs. But the guy had enough space. He worked on someone else's documents. He had none of his own. Bill accepted this life. He even started to like it. A free tramp with no past. Still, sometimes Bill would jump up at night in bed from some vague, disturbing dreams. He'd wake up in a sweat and couldn't remember what he'd just dreamed. But he knew it had something to do with the past. There was a small television set in Bill's den. The guy liked to watch the news in the evenings, but sometimes he also watched soap operas. It made it easier to fall asleep. And then one day it happened under the New Year's Eve, the TV screen suddenly went interference. This often happened. The guy began to spin the antenna at random and caught an unfamiliar channel. News of some other city. He was about to switch over, but suddenly a statue caught his attention. A journalist was broadcasting something about traffic jams blocking traffic in the city. She was standing near the fountain, and Bill realized that he had seen the statue of a boy with a toy bear in his hands standing in the center of the fountain many times. Immediately, memories began to come, scraps of vivid, realistic scenes. Here he is, 8 years old, running with his friends along the bottom of the fountain around this very boy with the bear. They are collecting coins that they managed to throw here for luck. Passers-by shout and argue, will they have enough for ice cream? He's about 18. Next to him is a woman. She has such a kind, dear face. Mom is Mom. The person who always supported him in everything. How could he forget her? Flashes of memories flashed with dizzying speed. The boy remembered everything: his name, his address, his hobbies, his whole life before the hospital. And the moment of the landslide, too. Then his eyes suddenly went black. Bill realized he was losing consciousness. The thought flashed through his mind, what if I forget again? It didn't. Bill woke up on the cold floor. He sat up, looked around. He remembered everything. The boy knew who he was and where he came from. And now there wasn't a second to wait. I went to the police and told them everything Bill recalled, looking off into the distance. Everyone listened with bated breath. Even Deborah, who already knew the story. They sent a request, then called my mother to identify me. He continued. Of course I recognized him, Deborah interjected. Deep down, I always knew this moment would come. So I wasn't surprised. In fact, I was glad. How did you get so far away from here? How did you get to that town? One of Bill's friends asked. The current must have swept me right into the river. That's what saved me, Bill answered. I was unconscious, but by some miracle I didn't drown. The current carried me many kilometers ahead. Somewhere out there I washed ashore. Local fishermen found me, called the police and an ambulance. That's how it all came together. So they sent out an APB on you in a completely different neighborhood, said the girl thoughtfully. Is that why they didn't find you? Bill nodded. And then suddenly his face lit up with a wide smile which Sarah had already taken a liking to. Well, why are you sitting so glum? The main thing is that everything ended well. The rest of the evening went wonderfully. Everyone talked, laughed, recalled funny incidents from Bill's past. He told the audience about his former life. According to him, it seemed that the guy had had an easy and pleasant life even then. But Sarah realized that it was certainly not easy. Bill is an easygoing, cheerful person. Such people never complain and do not portray themselves as victims, but find the bright side in everything. Sarah suddenly realized that she was trying to catch Bill's gaze. When their eyes met, it was like a warm wave washed over her. She liked everything about this man, his appearance, his demeanor, and his voice. Sarah tried to keep her eyes on the handsome guy, but she couldn't help it. She could only hope that it was not noticeable to the others, who fortunately were very much engaged in the conversation. As darkness fell, it was time to leave. Bill suddenly volunteered to walk Sarah to a cab. Deborah had given her some goodies, pies, pancakes, even pilaf in a casserole dish. She always did that, thinking that Sarah didn't eat anything alone. That's why she was so thin. It's a magically beautiful evening, Bill remarked when he and Sarah were on the porch. The girl agreed with him. The moon, which had come out from behind the clouds, turned the snowdrifts into frozen sculptures that had come down the hill. Yes, Sarah nodded and added, it's warm, it's nice. I don't even want to go home. Maybe you don't have to. Bill squinted slyly. I suggest we take a walk in the park. See how beautifully it's always decorated for New Year's Eve. I haven't seen it in a long time. I'd like to see it. Are you in? I'm in, Sarah answered. A quiet joy rose in her heart. She was so reluctant to leave Bill, and now he offered to continue the evening. The guy confidently took the girl by the hand and led her towards the park. He cheerfully told about his memories connected with this place. But Sarah almost did not listen. Her ears were pounding. Her heart was racing. Her cheeks burned like flames. She marveled at the effect this man had on her. This had never happened to her before. Bill looked risky, free and natural. He walked as if nothing had happened, held Sarah's hand, and seemed to notice nothing special. He continued to tell her something, pointing one way or the other. Sarah wanted this moment to last forever, her palm in his, him by her side. But Bill was spotted by some guys she knew. They came up to him, barraged him with questions. He let go of Sarah's hand to say hello to his buddies. And then a girl appeared out of nowhere, a very pretty girl, tall, slender, with long blonde hair poking out from under a hat. She threw herself around Bill's neck. He picked her up easily, whirled her around. The girl suddenly kissed him right in front of everyone. Bill looked at her with joyful admiration and did not let go. I guess I'll be going, said Sarah. The magic of the evening was irretrievably lost because of that beauty in the soft blue coat. So graceful and perfect, like a goddess. And Bill's looking at her. There's something between them. Maybe she was his girlfriend before all this happened to him. Why? Bill looked at her with surprise and regret. Sarah was very excited that night, Bill said. The evening is just beginning. I'll introduce you to everyone here. You're going to love it." Sarah got ready and started to call a cab since she had to be early for work tomorrow. Her friends walked Sarah to the car. Bill was holding the hand of a beautiful girl in a blue coat named Emma. Sarah realized that she and Bill had once gone to school together, at home. Sarah took a warm bath to calm down. But it didn't help. She still couldn't find her place, pacing from corner to corner, remembering the episodes of that amazing and so long evening. She tried to make sense of her feelings for Bill. He had clearly caught her eye at first sight. Was it really love? After the sad story with Ben, Sarah had tried to avoid even a hint of romance. She'd gotten burned too badly back then. And then she remembered the episode with Emma. She couldn't stop thinking about it. And when Bill took Emma's hand, Sarah's eyes swam. The situation with Emma had caused Sarah unexpected pain. She was still reeling, imagining Bill and Emma together and speculating, trying to figure out who they were to each other. Obviously there was, or had been something between them before. Or will there be in the future? Sarah didn't sleep a wink until almost morning and then made the decision not to think about Bill anymore, not to dream about him, not to make plans. He was no match for her. So smart and handsome and manly. Not everyone could handle what this guy had to endure. Who is she? No, Bill's more suited to a girl like Emma. That's something we have to accept. Deborah and Sarah decided not to go to her place for the time being. She was afraid of meeting Bill. She missed the old lady and often called her, but refused invitations to come over, citing busyness. And so it was in fact at work, hot time, reports, inspections. No time to visit. Deborah sometimes said something about Bill while talking to Sarah on the phone. The guy was back at university and decided to finish his studies by correspondence, because he got a job and started his own business at the same time. He lost so much time and now he's trying to make up for it, Deborah shared with Sarah. Her voice was clearly proud of her son. He was always so active, and now he's just not at all. I hardly ever see him at home. He's out and about. That's good. That's great. I still can't believe I finally found my son. If you can't come to me, I'll come visit you. I miss you tonight. I'll bring you some pies because I know you probably don't eat anything there. Sarah always enjoyed Deborah's visits. She was used to sharing all her worries and joys with her. But now she couldn't tell her loved one about the most important thing, because Deborah was Bill's mother. And yet Sarah met with the guy a few more times. He'd pick up her mother when she stayed late at Sarah's house. He'd come into the room with a smile on his face, and it would become cheerful. The house was filled with a special energy, which Sarah felt almost physically. Bill joked with Sarah, asked her a couple of non-committal phrases. He was good at keeping a casual conversation going. He was interested in the girl's affairs and occasionally said something about himself. Sarah tried desperately to glean from his stories and Deborah's words whether Bill was seeing Emma, but it was impossible to understand. On a lovely May evening, Sarah was coming home from work. She felt light and peaceful. The sight of nature awakening always had a calming effect on the girl. Besides, tomorrow was a day off, and all the reports were already turned in. She could relax and unwind. At the entrance of the dormitory, Sarah noticed Bill's car. Her heart raced, as it always did when she met this man. The guy had already seen her and got out of the car. He stood with his elbows resting on the bumpers, smiling as always. Strange, why was he here? "Hi," said Bill. He pulled up alongside him. "Girl, hello. I don't have Deborah. Is something wrong?" "I'm not here to see her." "Who was it for?" "You, of course." What did Sarah feel? Electric pulses running through her body. He said, "To you, meaning her, Sarah, me?" Automatically, the girl asked again. Yes, Bill's smile grew even wider and warmer, or something. "You have such a surprised look on your face, as if some star had come to see me, not me." "Well, it's not every day you come to see me either," Sarah smiled back. She tried her best not to show her joy at seeing her boyfriend. He had come to see her, the two of them alone, with no one else around. "Decided it was time to have a serious talk," Bill said suddenly. He'd been meaning to for a long time. "Do you have time?" Does she have time for Bill? She always does. Sarah nodded affirmatively. "Good. Then get in. I'll take you to a very nice place." The girl gladly settled into the front passenger seat. Bill drove her through the evening city and, as always, told her something and joked. Sarah felt really happy at this moment. He's there for her. They are going somewhere, it doesn't matter where. And most importantly, there is a warmth and sympathy coming from Bill. He looks at her in that special way. Sarah's heart occasionally sank with a sweet premonition, but she forbade herself to hope there was no telling what Bill wanted to talk to her about. Could it have anything to do with Deborah? And here she was, daydreaming. Bill drove the car down the suburban highway. On both sides of the road were fields, crops, bushes, and hills. It all looked fantastic in the setting sun. Sarah enjoyed the view and didn't ask any questions. She was having a great time as it was. Finally, Bill parked the car on the curb, got out of the salon, gallantly opened the door in front of Sarah, and extended his hand to her. The scents of stepped grasses warmed by the sun during the day fell on the girl. "Let's climb that hill," Bill said, pointing with his hand. They climbed the hill, and Sarah's mind was swarming with questions. But she realized that Bill would explain everything himself. She didn't want to disturb the silence with her irrepressible curiosity. Soon they were at the top. "I wanted to show you this beauty," the boy said. "Look around." Sarah was breathtakingly surprised by the view. The city was visible from the hill, the blue of the distance in a light haze. Beautiful, big, unfamiliar from this angle. It was beautiful and breathtaking. "Knew you'd appreciate it," Bill said with a smile, looking at the girl. "Thank you. It really is an incredible sight. If we wait until dark, it'll be even more beautiful. The lights will come on. It's beyond description. I often come here to reflect, to relax, but to be alone. This is my place. Now it's yours, too." Sarah realized that Bill was about to say something important. He looked determined. "Sarah, I want to be as honest and straightforward with you as possible," he began. "So you should know that I've been thinking about you ever since we first met." This confession made the girl dizzy and gave her goosebumps. "What happened to me, that story, taught me how to be a good judge of character," Bill went on. "I saw at once what a wonderful person you are. Trustworthy, kind, and sincere. Not just a beautiful girl, but special. Unique. There's no one else like you. And I would very much like to be near you, to protect you, to help you in this life, to see every day your wonderful eyes and kind smile. If you're such a good judge of people," Sarah finally pulled herself together and looked directly into her companion's eyes, "then you must have noticed how I feel about you." "I can feel it," Bill agreed. "But I need to be sure, and that's why I'm having this conversation." "I'm glad you decided to do it," Sarah smiled. Bill understood. He came closer and put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. They stood like that for a long, long time, smiling, silent, alone in the whole world, and looked at the city, which gradually decorated itself with bright running lights.
Study, Louisa. With an education, you can't go anywhere, and I'll help you in any way I can, said Brianna to her daughter while she was studying at school. Louisa grew up an obedient, kind, hard-working girl. She never knew her father. She was raised by her mother and grandmother. Brianna tried hard to make sure that her daughter did not need anything and did not feel inferior to her friends. She worked all day long and only spent time with her daughter on the rare weekends she had. One day, when Louise was in 8th grade, she overheard a conversation between her mother and grandmother. How could he do that? Brianna almost cried. I trusted him, and he... What am I supposed to do now? What's the use of crying after the time? Answered Victoria. It's God's will. If it happened, then so be it. I'd like to raise Louise. Her mother wailed. And then there's this. The woman kept interrupting her phrases, so the girl could not understand what her grandmother and mother were saying. Suddenly, Brianna asked, Will you stay a couple of days with Louise while I'm in the hospital? Don't you dare. I forbid you. Victoria was indignant. These are not toys. You should have thought about it before. Now don't anger God. We'll raise it. We raised Louise and we'll raise another child. Louise dropped the textbook she was holding in her hands in surprise. Her mother came running at the sound. What's wrong? How long have you been standing there? She asked. Mom, are you going to have a baby? Ignoring her mother's question, the girl asked. No, you misunderstood everything. The woman began to twist. I need to go away for a while, and I asked Grandma to look after you. Why are you lying to me? The daughter asked. I clearly heard Grandma say that we would raise another child. Her daughter's words confused her. She flapped her eyelashes and remained silent. Victoria still did not interfere in their conversation, but seeing her daughter's confusion, she said, "Louise, you are an adult and have a right to know. It just so happens that you will soon have a little sister or brother." "Mom," Brianna tried to stop her. "Louisa, don't listen to her. Grandma's got it all wrong." Louise hugged her mother and whispered, "I've dreamed so much about having a sister. I pray for it every night, and God has heard my prayers. I will help you with everything, but don't take away my dream. Together we can do it." Brianna was moved by her daughter's words. She pressed the girl against her and cried. Seeing this picture, Victoria exhaled with relief and said, "Well, thank God, I've got it all figured out." At the due date, Brianna gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby girl and named her Martha. Louise, as promised, never left her sister's side, and when she was at school, Victoria took care of the baby girl. Brianna had to leave maternity leave after 3 months to keep her job. Martha's father never showed up at their house or showed any interest in their daughter, so the baby's birth certificate, like Louise's, had a dash on it. Victoria loved her granddaughters. She was very worried about them and feared that they would repeat their mother's fate. She often stroked their heads and sighed, saying, "My orphans." Louise did not understand why her grandmother called them that, because they had a mother and grandmother who loved them. But Victoria's words became prophetic. When Louise was finishing 11th grade, Victoria suddenly fell ill. The doctors couldn't make an accurate diagnosis, so they treated one thing or another. But the medicines didn't help. Every day she was getting worse and worse. Just recently, a woman full of strength was dying in front of her family. On the day when Louisa received her high school diploma, Victoria passed away. Louise wanted to go to work to help her mother raise her younger sister, but Brianna insisted that the girl continue to study. Louise entered the institute without much difficulty. Now she had less time for her sister, but she still helped her mother whenever possible. Martha grew up a bright, inquisitive, and very mobile girl. She was always happy when her sister returned from the institute and followed her around all evening. She could sit next to Olga for hours and watch her comprehend the sciences. When Martha was 5 years old and Louise was in her 3rd year at the institute, Brianna suddenly fell ill. Thinking that it was just a cold, the woman did not pay attention to it and continued to go to work. But every day she got worse and worse. When she got to the hospital, it was too late. She was diagnosed with a terrible disease that was incurable. Brianna burned out like a candle in 6 months. After burying her mother, Louise, who had just entered her 4th year of college, was left with a little sister in her arms. From the inheritance, they had only a 2-room apartment on the outskirts of the city in which they lived. Having learned about the situation in the family, the guardianship and custody authorities immediately came to visit. Despite her older sister's resistance, Marta was taken to the orphanage with the words, "You are not able to support the child. You have no permanent income except for a scholarship, but that is not enough. Get a job and then come to us." For several days, Louise went door to door looking for work, and luck smiled on her. She found a job as a housekeeper in a wealthy house. The owner, a woman in her 50s, was looking for a housekeeper, but she needed references. After talking to Louise and finding out all the circumstances that had brought her to her, she took a liking to the girl and took her on probation. "If you're right for me, I won't hurt your salary and I'll help you get your sister back," Donna promised. Louise tried hard to please her employer, and after a few weeks she managed to get Martha out of the orphanage. She was happy, even though it was not easy for her now. Early in the morning, Louise took her sister to daycare and drove to the other side of the city, where she had to take care of the housework. Good thing, even in the lifetime of her mother and grandmother, the girl learned to manage the household. From work, she ran to the institute. In the evening, Louise would go to the kindergarten to pick up Marta, and the sisters would return home together. Marta, though she was still very young, often noticed the tiredness on her sister's face. At such times, she would sit down beside her, put her arm around her, and like an adult say, "It's hard for you, Louisa, but don't be sad. I'll grow up soon and I'll help you with everything. The main thing is that we're together. Just don't leave me." Louise hugged Marta motherly and replied with a smile, "We will definitely manage everything." Louise was pleased that she had found a job and was able to bring her sister home. Over time, she became attached to her employer. The relationship between the owner and the housekeeper was warm, even friendly. The girl was surprised by only one thing. Why does a nice in every way, kind in every way, smart, intelligent, wealthy woman lives alone? She did not dare to ask directly, and Donna did not tell anything about herself. One day, while cleaning, Louise came across a photo album and couldn't resist her curiosity. One page after another, she looked at the pictures of young Donna. Some of them showed her posing alone, some had her friends by her side. Only one picture showed Donna with a handsome young man. It looked very happy. Engrossed in the photo, Louisa did not notice how the landlady entered the room. When she saw the photo album in her hands, she said, "All my memories are in it. Friends, colleagues, just acquaintances. And who is this?" Louise asked cautiously, pointing to the picture of a young man. "You're both so happy here." Donna sat down next to her, took the photo in her hands, looked at the smiling faces for a few minutes in silence, as if remembering the events in which it was taken, and then spoke. "You're right. We are very happy here indeed," she said. "This is Jack, my fiancé. We are 30 years old in this photo. We loved each other. I thought we're going to get married, making plans for the future. And then it was over in an instant." Donna was silent. Louisa felt that it was difficult for her mistress to remember the events of distant years and even more difficult to talk about them. The girl put her arm around Donna and rested her head on her shoulder. The woman smiled, though there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "Is he dead?" Louise tried to pull her mistress out of her memories. "Who?" Donna woke up. "Jack?" "No, he's fine, I guess." After a little more silence, the woman pulled herself together and continued. "A week before the wedding, I found out he was seeing someone else." "What do you mean?" Louise was surprised. "Why get married if you love someone else?" Donna smiled and looked at the housekeeper with a slight squint of her eyes. "You're still young. You don't understand a lot of things. You trust people, and they often take advantage of our kindness and gullibility. By my 30s, I had already achieved a lot in life. I had my own business, which developed and brought a good income. I lived in a spacious apartment and planned to buy a house. I could already afford to go on vacation twice a year. Sergei liked all this. You bet." The girl couldn't help her emotions. "He was happy to go on vacation with me," Donna continued, not paying attention to the exclamation of the housekeeper. "He made plans for our future together every day. He already had a design in his head for the house we were to live in, us and our children. He dreamed of me having a child with him, or better yet, 2 or 3. He had it all figured out. By his own admission, he wanted to marry me, put me on maternity leave, and take my place in my business. He gradually transferred the money into his accounts and then, would fly away to his dove, who for the sake of enrichment was willing to endure all this, waiting for him." What a horror. Louise was genuinely amazed. "And where did you meet him?" 3 years before the events I described, he came to work at my company. His good education and experience spoke in his favor. Jack was a quick learner, quick to grasp things. His determination, diligence, and persistence were amazing. At first, he caught my attention as an employee. There aren't many like him. Gradually, our communication turned into a friendly one, and 2 years later, he made me an offer. I knew him only from a positive side, so I immediately agreed. Before him, I had many admirers, but in all of them I found some flaw. Jack seemed perfect to me. It's true what they say. Love is blind. When you found out about the affair, did you break up with him? Yes, I kicked him out the same day. After Sergei, no one could win your heart, Louise asked. I was already pregnant when I broke up with him, Donna admitted. I found out that day and rushed home to make my fiancé happy. But the surprise didn't work. He brought his mistress to my apartment. The woman was still surprised by her fiancé's insolence. A banal story. But it always seems to happen only in the movies or somewhere far away. But not to you. Donna summed up her story. And the baby? Louise asked. Was it born? Yes, of course it was. I had a healthy, beautiful boy at the due date, and I named him Austin. Where is he now? He's on an internship in America. He should be back soon. I admire you, Donna, Louise said with emotion. You're so strong. You made your own business. You raised your son alone, gave him a good education. Yes, I did everything for him, the woman confirmed. I felt guilty that I had deprived him of communication with his father. So I tried to fill the gap in every way I could. If clothes, shoes, then the best, branded, vacation only abroad, education European. In short, I worked day and night to provide my boy with the best. He must love you very much and appreciate everything you do for him. Louisa's question remained unanswered. Donna abruptly changed the subject, remembering that she had a business appointment. Louise and her sister spent the whole weekend at Donna's house. At her mistress' request, she cleaned the rooms several times, especially the one for the young master. Finally, exhausted, the housekeeper said, "Donna, the whole house is already shining. Don't you think you've done enough cleaning?" After a second look in all the most secret corners, she agreed. "All right, it looks clean," she said, and then added, "Austin doesn't like the house to be dusty or cluttered." Early the next week, the mother was looking forward to her son's arrival. "You don't have to come tomorrow," she told Louise the day before. "Austin and I will need some alone time. It's been so long since we've seen each other." The housekeeper nodded and said goodbye. The next day after school, Louise hurried to the daycare center to pick up her sister early. The weather was overcast. It had been raining since the morning. In the afternoon, the rain stopped, but the humidity and strong wind were pervasive. Louise was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus when a car stopped nearby. A young man got out of the car and, ignoring the people around him, headed toward the flower store behind the bus stop. Louise looked at the stranger at the door and suddenly caught herself thinking, "Lucky the girl he's going to marry will be lucky." Without realizing what it was about him that attracted her attention, she noted his confident gait, his noble bearing, his attractive appearance, and the trail of expensive cologne that followed him drove her crazy. The young man came out of the store with a gorgeous bouquet of flowers. The thought flashed through Louise's mind again. Who is the lucky girl to whom these flowers are intended? The stranger got into the car and drove off briskly. Louise, who was standing next to him, was wet and dirty from the splashing from the wheels. The car sped away, and the girl stood there, almost crying, trying to clean herself up. The first pleasant impression, which at first left a young man, was spoiled. The next morning, Louise came to work. To her surprise, Donna was in no hurry to go anywhere. She was sitting on the living room couch drinking coffee, the aroma of which wafted throughout the house. Saying hello to her hostess, the girl asked in surprise, "Are you alone? And where is your son?" "He is still asleep," answered the woman and took a sip of the fragrant drink. "You don't have to go up to the second floor today. Wipe the dust in the living room and wash the dishes left over from last night's dinner." Louise went to the dining room. She was surprised to see on the table the same bouquet of flowers that had been brought from the store by the stranger who had doused her from the puddle the day before. While the housekeeper washed the dishes, the young master went down to the living room. Turning off the water, Louise found herself an unwilling witness to part of the conversation between mother and son. "This is my life," said the young man, "and it is for me to decide how and with whom to spend it. I think I have the right to express my opinion on this," came Donna's voice. "It seems to you," answered the son and went to the dining room. When he crossed the threshold, the young man stood up in surprise. It was the stranger with the bouquet. "And who are you?" he asked, not very kindly. "Louise," she introduced herself. "I am the housekeeper." "Hey, I see," he said with what she thought was a twinge of squeamishness, and went into the refrigerator. "Can you make an omelet?" "I do, only it's not." Louise wanted to say that cooking was not her job. She preferred to cook her own food. But the young man did not want to hear her out. Apparently, it was not in his habits. "Then make it quick," he said. "I don't have much time." Louise didn't want to spoil her relationship with the landlady's son, so she took out a frying pan and began to fry an omelet. She often made this dish for breakfast in the mornings, so it was as good as a professional cook. It's been a long time since I've had an omelet like that," said Austin. "You surprised me." "Thank you." Louise realized that she was pleased with Austin's praise. At that moment, Donna entered the dining room. Now she was in full dress, as always. "I see you two have met," she said. "Thank you, Louise, for breakfast. You can be free. But don't forget to dust the living room." After finishing her work, The girl walked along the road towards the institute and replayed in her head the events of the last 2 days. Something was wrong with Donna and Austin's relationship. For all his external attractiveness, there was something repulsive in the young man's behavior. On the one hand, that gorgeous bouquet for his mother, and at the same time, the rude conversation with her in the morning. Louise remembered with what impatience Donna waited for her son, and now they behaved as if they were strangers to each other. She couldn't stop asking herself, why did Austin have such an attitude toward the closest person to her? What could she have done to displease him? And what were they arguing about in the living room? A familiar voice interrupted her thought process. Louise turned her head and saw Austin sitting behind the wheel of the very car that had doused her the day before. He was smiling with his mouth full of white teeth like a Hollywood actor. While Louise was gathering her thoughts, the young man repeated his question. "How far are you going? I can give you a ride." "No, thank you," she replied. "I'm almost there." "Well, as you wish," Austin said with a shrug of his shoulders and drove off sharply. One day, Louise came in when Donna was no longer home. After cleaning up, the girl was about to leave, but Austin stopped her. "Are you leaving already?" he asked. "I was going to ask you to clean my room." Louise took a vacuum cleaner, a rag, a bucket of water, and went up to the second floor. All the time she was skillfully operating the vacuum cleaner, Austin stood in the doorway and watched the cleaning. At one point, Louise felt out of place. "Is something wrong?" she asked. No, it's great. I love watching other people work. Have you tried getting a job?" Austin didn't like Louise's question. He wrinkled his nose and concluded, "You're impertinent," and then added, clearly wanting to put her in her place. "But what can you take from a housekeeper? You've hardly been taught manners." "I see you didn't go to etiquette school either," Louise suggested in the same tone. "If you'll allow me, I'll take over." "Of course, the money has to be paid," Austin said and left the room. Having finished cleaning, Louise went downstairs. Austin was lying on the sofa in the living room. When he saw the housekeeper, he stood up and looked at her from head to toe and asked, "Is it over already? So soon? Check it out. If there's anything wrong, I'll fix it." With a hum, the young man went upstairs. After a minute, he looked out of his room and said, "That'll do for the first time." "Thank you, and that's it," Louisa replied and headed for the exit. "Why did your mother take you?" he said to her. "You're always in a hurry. What if I need a housekeeper tonight?" "Donna is quite satisfied with my candidacy." The girl was not confused. "You should hire someone else. You're too talkative," the young man said irritably. "This is no way for a servant to behave. And you find yourself a deaf mute. She will not hear your rudeness and will not cross you," Louisa replied and disappeared behind the door. Austin shook his head unhappily and went back to his room. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this. Usually girls looked him in the mouth, trying to please the enviable beau. But now some housekeeper had taken the liberty of speaking to him disrespectfully. It really hurt the young man. And at the same time, Austin was impressed by Louise's boldness and sharp wit. The next day, the young master got up early. Louise caught him in the kitchen as he rummaged in the refrigerator. Donna was finishing her coffee and giving her son advice on what to eat for breakfast. "Maybe our housekeeper could make me something," Austin suggested, looking at Louisa. The girl looked at him, then at her hostess. Catching her questioning look, Donna said, "Louisa, if it's not too much trouble for you, feed my hungry son. At the end of the month, I'll recalculate your paycheck." The housekeeper quickly threw on an apron and started preparing breakfast. Meanwhile, the housekeeper said goodbye to the household and left for work. While Austin devoured Ova's cheesecakes, she began to clean up. Wiping the dust in the office, the girl felt a stare. Turning around, she saw Austin standing on the doorstep, watching her every move. "Did you need something?" she asked. "I wanted to thank you for the cheesecakes," he said. "I'm glad you liked them." The girl wanted to continue her work, but she noticed that Austin was not leaving. "Anything else?" she asked. "You're feeding me breakfast," the young man replied. "Let me take you to lunch." "Thanks, but I eat lunch at the institute in the cafeteria." "I see. Where do you get the money for restaurants?" "But don't worry. If I invite you, I pay." "You're an amazing man," she said, apparently wanting to thank you. "You managed to offend. I do not need your restaurants. I trust the canteen at the institute more." Come on, don't pout. Austin tried to reconcile. I don't understand your stubbornness either. You're invited to a restaurant, and you refuse. Aren't you used to rejection? Louise suggested. Usually girls jump to the ceiling when I ask them to spend time with me, Austin admitted. I'd had enough of your company here, she retorted, and your ceilings are high. I can't jump, so I'm not going to try. Okay, we don't have time for lunch, so why don't we have dinner tonight? If you don't want to go to a restaurant, let's go to a cafe or a canteen, he said and grinned. Maybe I'll like it there too. I don't think so, Louisa replied. Dine with your sportswoman where you're used to. I'll make do with homemade cutlets. Well, as you like, said Austin, not hiding his displeasure. But if you change your mind, let me know. My offer still stands. Are you in a hurry again? Austin asked when Louise was about to leave. Should my room be cleaned? You were asleep. I didn't want to wake you, she replied. I have to go to the institute. If you can't wait until tomorrow to clean, I can come back after school. Do me a favor. After class, Louisa went to work. Donna wasn't home yet, but Austin welcomed her with open arms. I thought you weren't coming. Ignoring her young master's nagging, Louise changed into her work clothes and headed upstairs. What was her surprise when she entered Austin's room? Orderly and clean, everything was in its proper place. The surprised housekeeper turned to the young man who had followed her and asked, "Did you clean it yourself? Do you think I can't even tidy my own room?" He answered her question with a question. I didn't say that, Louise remarked. Then why did you have to invite me? It's a good thing the institute is within walking distance of your house. Otherwise, you wouldn't be lured to dinner, Austin explained. What dinner? She asked, not hiding her annoyance. I have to go to kindergarten. My child is waiting for me, and I'm going to have dinner here. While Austin was digesting what the housekeeper had said, Louise went downstairs, changed her clothes, and headed out. She was stopped at the door by the young master. So you have a child? And you're breaking like a girl, he said and grabbed her arm and pulled her to him. Louise didn't have time to realize what was happening when Austin pressed her against the wall and started kissing her. The girl tried to resist, but the forces were unequal. With one hand, the guy held her arms, and the other was already getting under her skirt. Let me go, Louise demanded. I'll tell Dawn everything. And I'll tell her that you attacked me, Austin replied with a sneer in his voice. Who is she going to believe? Her son or some cleaning lady? Let me go, she said, trying to get away. Don't you have enough groupies? What do you need me for? The girl's fierce resistance made the young man even more eager. His kisses became more and more demanding, and his hands roamed all over her body. In one motion, Austin pulled Louise down onto the couch and began to undo the buttons of her blouse. There are a lot of admirers, but they get boring, he admitted in a burst of passion. They're just a whistle away. And you're not like that. Then let me go, Louisa begged. I don't want to be like this. Austin had no time to say anything when his mother's voice came from behind him. What's going on here? She asked menacingly. Austin jumped up from the sofa like a scalded man and said, smoothing his hair and clothes with his hands, I didn't hear you come in. I noticed Donna parried. So what's going on here? Louise rose to follow Austin. Burning with shame, she hid her eyes and tried to tidy her clothes. Excuse me, Donna, the housekeeper said in a low voice. She wanted to explain the situation, but Austin interrupted her. Mom, we're adults to answer to you, he said. It seemed to me that Louise did not enjoy your caresses. You imagined it, replied the young man. No, I didn't. Louisa interrupted him. I'm sorry, Don, but I'm not going to work in your house anymore. I took a job as a housekeeper. It's not my job to please your son. You have nothing to apologize to me for, said the landlady. I'm the one who needs to apologize to you. Go home. We'll talk tomorrow. Louise grabbed her bag and quickly ran out of the house. She wanted to forget this nightmare as quickly as possible, but the scent of Austin's expensive cologne followed her all the way home. It wasn't until she took a shower that she was able to get rid of the intrusive scent. The next morning, Donna called Louise herself and asked her to come to her house. Austin wouldn't be there, she warned, but we need to talk. Half an hour later, Louise was already at Donna's house. Don't be angry with my son, she asked. He thinks money can buy everything and everyone. It's probably my fault. Like any loving mother, I always wanted the best for him, so I worked 20 hours a day. Austin was left to his own devices. When he was little, he had a nanny, but when he grew up and became independent, that's when the problem started. As is often the case when parents are very busy, the teenager got involved with a bad company, fell in love with a girl who at that time was already on the record in the police. The boy, who for 7 years of schooling had shown great promise, seemed to be replaced. He became rude, left home, skipped lessons at school. Persuasion and pleas didn't work. In order to pull him out of this company, I had to change my place of residence and the school my son attended. Austin was very worried about parting with this girl, blamed me for all the deadly sins. For a few years, our relationship was very strained, but gradually my son got his head on straight. He graduated from school with a silver medal and entered the institute. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but the spoiled relationship with my son never fully recovered. In his eyes, I remained forever busy mom, who first deprived him of his father, and then his favorite girl. But it's been so long. Louise couldn't contain her emotions. Your Austin is a grown man. He's only grown up, Donna replied, but in his heart, he's still a hurt little child who takes revenge for his wrongs whenever he gets the chance. But you said he was on an internship, Louise recalled. Yes, Austin had graduated with honors and had been offered a position with a well-known company, but he had to do an internship first. I hoped that being away from me would change him, and I thought it would, but yesterday I caught you. It wasn't my fault, Louise said. I was about to leave, but I believe you. The landlady interrupted her. You don't have to justify yourself to me. I thought my son liked you, and I hoped that you and he could have a relationship, but I guess I was wrong again. I don't think I'm the right girl for him, Louise said. We have different attitudes to life and people. Maybe, agreed Donna, but I still want to ask you not to leave my house. I've grown attached to you, and it's hard to find decent, honest people like you these days. After a short pause, Louise shook her head and said, No, Donna, I'm sorry, but I don't want to see your son again. I thought so, the woman admitted, and taking an envelope with a few bills from her dresser drawer, handed it to the housekeeper. This is your paycheck. Thank you for your work, but you should think about it. Maybe you'll change your mind. A few days passed after Louise was fired from Donna's house. During the time she'd been working, she'd been able to put aside some money, which now came in handy. The allowance from the state was also a good help. Not to say that the sisters did not need anything, but they were not poor either. Louise's main concern was that the guardianship authorities would not come to check on them. Louise, will they take me back to the orphanage? Marta asked her sister every now and then. No, they won't, Louisa answered. I'll find another job soon. But in a pinch, I'll go to Donna. She promised to help. It's a shame you don't work for Aunt Donna anymore. I liked her, Martha confided to her sister on the walk. I liked her too, agreed Louise. But unfortunately, we can't always do what we want to do. Why don't we visit her? Martha suggested it. She won't kick us out, will she? She won't, confirmed her big sister. But let's do it some other time. Why some other time? Suddenly, a man's voice came from behind the sisters sitting on the bench. My man will be glad to see you. The girls turned around. Austin was standing behind them with a bouquet in his hands. Hearing the familiar voice, Louise flinched. All these days, she had been trying to forget about the incident, and she certainly hadn't expected to see him in the yard of her own house. Who are you? Martha inquired. The young man walked around the bench and squatted down in front of the girl, extended his hand to her and introduced himself. Uncle Austin, what's your name? Martha, she answered cheerfully and pointing to the flowers asked, And who are these for? Your mom, the man said and handed the bouquet to Louise. My mom is dead and Louise is my sister, the girl explained. Martha's words confused Austin. I'm sorry. He turned to Martha. I didn't know. What are you doing here? Louise asked, making it clear that she was not happy to see him. I came to apologize for my behavior. I don't know what came over me. Take these flowers as a token of reconciliation. I forgive you, but I won't take the flowers, Louisa replied and went home. Louisa, I was going to ask you to come back to work. No, I promise to behave. I'm not sure you know anything about decorum. Everybody can make mistakes, Austin said in his defense, but you have to be able to forgive. I said I forgave you, the girl reminded him, but I'm not going to work for you anymore. What can I do to make you change your mind? Why such persistence? I'm sure there will be a lot of people willing to take my place. By the way, maybe they'll be more cooperative. Austin, who was not accustomed to long persuasion, could hardly contain his irritation. I wouldn't have insisted if it hadn't been for my mother, he admitted. She's been giving me a hard time. How did you win her over? Louise is the best. Martha stood up for her sister. The young man looked at the girl and then back at the former housekeeper. Think it over, he said. We won't hurt your wages. Putting the bouquet on the bench, Austin walked quickly to the car. In a minute, he was already behind the house. Martha looked at him and said, "What a nasty uncle. Did you leave Aunt Donna because of him?" "Yes," she admitted. "I didn't like him at first either." "It's a shame you don't work there anymore," Martha said on the way home. The sisters never returned to the subject again, but it didn't take Austin long. A couple of days later, he met Louise after school. "Are you following me?" she asked irritably. "Finally, you stopped yelling at me," the young man remarked. "I think we're even closer now." "Why did you come here?" Louise repeated the question. "I wanted to see if you had changed your mind." "No." "That's a pity. Mammon's having a hard time." Austin paused, as if waiting for a clarifying question, but when he didn't, he continued. "I was hoping your return would get her back on her feet quickly." "What does that mean?" Louise didn't understand. "Didn't I say?" Mammon stumbled on the porch and fell and broke her leg. Now she's sitting at home, telling me every minute how bad I am. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" The girl got worried. "Are you driving?" "We're in the car," Austin replied with a smirk. "Will you even get in my car?" "If you don't mind," Louise said and followed him. Austin turned the key in the ignition and pressed the gas pedal. The car squealed and sped forward like a rocket. Louise's breath caught in her throat. "Don't be afraid. I'll take you home like an airplane," the driver promised. "The main thing is not to take off early," she replied, holding tightly to the handle. "And you with humor," noted the young man and grinned. Soon the car pulled up outside Donna's house. Austin got out of the car and called out to his mother, but no one answered. Stepping over the threshold of the house, he shouted, "Maman, look who I brought you." Louise appeared at the door. She immediately saw the owner sitting on the sofa in the living room with a plastered leg. Donna was overjoyed to see her guest. "What a surprise," she exclaimed. "Unexpected, but very pleasant. Have you changed your mind and decided to come back?" "Come in." "Well, why are you standing on the doorstep like a stranger?" Donna was genuinely happy to see Louisa. She didn't know where to sit her or what to serve her. "Well, you two talk," Austin said, going upstairs. "When you go home," he said to Louise, "call me. I'll drive you." "Thank you," she replied, "but I know the way. I'll try myself." "As you wish." The landlady and the former housekeeper sat over a cup of tea and talked like good old friends. Donna was interested in the girl's studies, her plans for the future, asked about her younger sister, and did not fail to complain about the accident that had happened to her 2 days ago. But most of the time the woman talked about her son. "I think Austin has begun to grow up," she admitted. "He is changing in front of my eyes. He stopped being rude, became more restrained and patient, helps me around the house. And most importantly, he went to work. It's about time he got his head on straight." "Yes," Donna agreed, "but I think you can take credit for that." "Me?" Louise was surprised. "You're exaggerating. I haven't worked for you for half a month. It was after you left that I started to notice a change in my son. Maybe he's fallen in love with you." "Donna, don't make this up. I'm just a servant for your son, a cleaning lady. Men like him don't even look at men like me. And frankly, I'm not crazy about Austin." "You should look at him though," Mom said. "He's not bad at heart. Austin was great when he was a kid, if it hadn't been for his exposure to bad company." "I understand," Louise interrupted her. "Like a loving mother, you idealize your child. But Austin's grown up now, and he has to take responsibility for his actions." "You're right, Louise. You're absolutely right. But everyone can make mistakes. Give him a chance. I see the way he looks at you. You're not like the rest of his girlfriends, mercantile, glossy, capricious dolls who are used to having fun and doing nothing. You're real. You're just like me when I was young. That's probably why I'm so attached to you." "I am flattered to hear you say that," Louisa replied. "But don't try to set me up with your son. I am not sure that we both need it. The conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Austin. Glancing at the clock on the wall, he asked the guest, "Aren't you going to be late for kindergarten?" Louise jumped up like a scalded woman. "Oh, I've forgotten all about the time," she confessed. "Donna, get well. I'll visit you again, with your permission. Or maybe you can come back to us at least for a while," the landlady asked, "until I get better." Louise was taken by surprise by her landlady's request. She didn't want to see Austin every day, but she couldn't say no to someone in need. "Okay, I'll go to work tomorrow," she promised and headed for the exit. "Can I give you a ride after all?" Austin asked. "I'm going your way. I won't bother you," he promised and grinned. "Come on, Louise." Donna joined in. "You'll have a long ride on public transportation, and the daycare center will be closed by then." "All right," she said, and followed Austin. Almost the whole way, the young people drove in silence. Stopping near the garden, Austin suddenly asked, "I do not understand why you have taken on all this trouble. You yourself are not yet firmly on your feet, and then there is your sister. Where am I supposed to put her?" Louise asked. "Well, there are boarding schools, orphanages," he began to enumerate. "I have no doubt that if you were in my place, you would have done the same thing. I love my sister. But you probably don't understand that." She was about to get out of the car, but Austin stopped her. "Why are you making a monster of me? I thought I already apologized for my behavior. I just wanted to say that it's hard to carry a baby on your own, especially in your situation." "Yes," Louise agreed. "It's a difficult position to be in. But Martha's my sister, and I'm the only one she's got. She has no one else to rely on. I will never abandon or betray her." "That is commendable," said Austin with his usual grin. "You decided to put your youth on her, and then she'll grow up and won't thank you for it. You shouldn't judge people by themselves. Not everyone grows up ungrateful," Louise retorted. "I don't do it for thanks. Perhaps I need it more than she does. But you don't understand that." Louise got out of the car and headed for the kindergarten. Austin stared after her until she disappeared around the corner. The housekeeper's words had hurt his ego. He hated to hear that he was an ungrateful, insensitive man. But she was right about something. Pressing the gas pedal, he drove off briskly and quickly disappeared. All the way he pondered Louise's words and analyzed his life. So far, everything had suited him. Austin considered himself a reasonably intelligent, educated, well-bred man. He was in demand with the opposite sex and authority among friends. He was used to people looking at his mouth and fawning over him. And here's some girl who knew nothing about his life, constantly wiping his nose. On the one hand, he found himself thinking that he liked Louise. Unlike the others, she did not ingratiate herself with him. On the contrary, she openly expressed her opinion. But at the same time, that was what annoyed him about her. Sometimes Austin felt that his mother's housekeeper thought too much of herself. The man, engrossed in his thoughts, did not notice that he had reached the house. Once inside, he saw that his mother was still sitting in the same place. At some point, the man felt his heart squeeze. "Mom, do you need help?" he asked. Donna flinched in surprise. "No," she said, and then suddenly added, "This is the first time you've called me Mom in a long time." "I've been mom and mother to you for a long time. Did something happen?" "No," Austin answered. "I just suddenly realized that I have no one else but you." Tears glistened in the woman's eyes. Austin, pretending not to notice, went quickly upstairs and hid in his room. The next day, Louise arrived at Donna's house as promised. Austin wasn't home, but his mother wouldn't stop talking about him. "You know, Austin's changed a lot since he met you. I think you're having a very positive effect on him," she shared with the housekeeper. "Don't exaggerate, Donna," the girl asked. "I don't take any credit for it. It's just that people change. Your son must have realized that you are the closest and dearest person to him." Having finished cleaning, Louisa said goodbye to the landlady and went to the institute. After class, she got an unexpected surprise. Austin met her on the way to the bus stop. He was holding a small but beautiful bouquet. "Hi, these are for you," he said and handed them to Louise. At times like this, Louise felt awkward. She still didn't trust Austin. It seemed to her that a man could not have changed so dramatically in such a short time. "It's unnecessary," she said, looking at the flowers. "Why did you come here?" "First of all, the flowers are a thank you for my mother. Thank you for helping her," Second, stop yelling at me. I'm only 5 years older than you. You don't have to thank me for something I do with heart and pleasure, especially not for free. Give those flowers to Donna. You again? Austin looked at the girl reproachfully. I will stop howling if you promise not to come to my institute with flowers anymore, she said. I don't want my classmates to start gossiping about me. What's wrong with a girl's boyfriend coming to pick her up? He asked. You're not my boyfriend, Louise reminded him. All right, agreed the young man. I promise not to compromise you again. Just take this bouquet. Louise sighed and took the flowers. I can give you a ride to the garden, Austin offered. It's not worth it. I'd rather take the bus. It's safer that way. Austin grinned his trademark smile and replied, I promise to drive slowly and deliver it safely on time. Okay, Louise gave in, one last time. The young man headed towards Austin's automobile. To the girl's surprise, he was as gallant and attentive as ever. Ahead of her by a few steps, the man opened the door in front of the passenger and kindly offered her his hand. It did not go unnoticed by Louise that this time Austin drove the car slowly and carefully. At some point, it seemed to her that there was a completely different person beside her. Not so long ago, the arrogant snob had magically transformed himself into a well-mannered, intelligent man, pleasant in every way. On the one hand, Louise liked this change in him. On the other hand, it frightened her, something fake about it. What are you thinking about? Austin asked, noticing the passenger's absent gaze out the window. About how a man can change in a few days, replied Louise. Are you referring to me? He clarified. Yes, I don't believe in such metamorphoses, she admitted. You're obviously up to something. I just don't know what it is. You're wrong, the young man tried to persuade her. It was my behavior before that was fake. I'm used to acting like that, he admitted. Women like confident, persistent, goal-oriented men. Confident but not cocky, Louise corrected him. Persistent but not insolent, determined but not pushy. So you think I'm a pushy, self-assured, impudent man? Austin concluded, yes. Louise's answer discouraged him. He was still unaccustomed to her honesty and directness, and at the same time, it turned him on. No woman had so far stirred his mind as Louise had. Her behavior aroused mixed feelings in him. On the one hand, he was magnetically drawn to her. On the other, he wanted to punish her for her unapproachability and intransigence. Here we are, Austin announced, stopping outside the nursery. I'll wait for you here. No need. It's just a short walk from here to our house. We'll walk with Martha. I don't mean to be intrusive, the man said, mindful of the conversation. But could I keep you company? Louise shrugged her shoulders and headed toward the kindergarten. Her sister ran out to meet her. Noticing Austin behind her, she asked in her ear, What's he doing here? We met by chance, Louise explained in a whisper, and he offered me a ride. Did he also give you flowers by chance? She asked in a whisper, and then she said, I don't like him anyway, even with flowers. After walking the sisters to the entrance, Austin suddenly suggested, maybe on the weekend we can walk in the park or go to the zoo together. No, Martha replied firmly. We had other plans. Louise was used to her younger sister's development, and Austin was discouraged by the little girl's answer. But quickly gathering his thoughts, he asked, Do you have dolls? Lots, Martha replied. Did they have their own dollhouse? After a short pause, the girl said, No, they live in my and Louise's house. But everyone should have their own house, Austin insisted. Would you like us to buy your dolls a house too? The pause dragged on. Martha could feel the thought process going on in her head. Like any girl, she wanted a dollhouse, but she still didn't trust Austin. Realizing the reason for the silence, the man turned to Louise. Do you mind if I give your sister a gift as a sign of reconciliation? I'm not sure it's right or necessary. Let's skip the expensive gifts. I'm about to get my first paycheck, the man said. I'd like to spend it on something nice. Louise wanted to reply, but Austin beat her to it, adding, I promise I won't neglect my mom. But that was unnecessary, she insisted. Thank you for the ride and for seeing her off, she said, and taking her sister's hand in hers, she disappeared down the driveway. On the morning of the day off, the girls were in no hurry. They had no special plans, so they lay in their beds and talked. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Jumping up like a scalded woman, Louise ran to the bathroom, shouting on the way. "Who?" "It's me, Austin," came a voice from outside the door. "Wait," commanded the girl and disappeared into the bathroom. Martha had made her bed and her sister's, and after glancing around the room and making sure everything was in order, she opened the door. The man was holding a huge box. As he crossed the threshold, he set it on the floor and said to Martha, "This is for you. Unpack it." The girl looked from the giver to the gift with disbelief. She guessed what was in the box, but did not dare to open it without her sister's permission. "Don't be shy," Austin urged her. "I promised you a doll's house, didn't I? Take it. I'm not going to carry this weight back, am I?" Martha's last argument seemed reasonable, and she began to remove the wrapping. After a hasty shower, Louise came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. She hadn't expected to see Austin here, so she froze in surprise for a few seconds and then disappeared out the door again. That was enough time for the man to get a glimpse of the housekeeper's chiseled figure. Her smooth legs, graceful arms, straight posture, slim waist, and narrow shoulders were as if chiseled by a talented craftsman. In such a way, Louise stirred Austin's imagination even more. In his mind, he was already imagining her in his arms. He had never wanted a woman so badly in his life. A moment later, Louise came out in the robe she had to get out of the laundry basket. But even in her crumpled housecoat, she looked very attractive and desirable. "I told you not to open the door to strangers," she reproached her sister. "But he's not a stranger," Martha replied, taking the doll's house out of its wrapping. "What the hell is this?" her older sister asked sternly, looking at the toy. "Now my dolls will have their own house," the girl said happily. "It's too expensive," Louisa said. "We can't accept it." Martha, engrossed in the toy, did not even react to her sister's words. "But I'm not going to take it back to the store," Austin replied. "They won't take it back without its wrapping." "Look how happy your sister is. Can't you take it away from her?" "Then I'll give you the money from my paycheck," Louisa suggested. "I will not take money from you," replied the young man. "But if you have extra, you can take me to the movies." "All right," she agreed. "But first, we need breakfast." While Louise made pancakes, Austin helped Martha set up the dollhouse. From the outside, they all looked like a close-knit family. Despite her distrust of the hostess's son, Louise watched her sister and the guest play with amusement. For a moment, she thought that he was indeed a kind and decent man. And the incident of molestation in the drawing room was only a misunderstanding, which Austin had long since repented of. "The pancakes are wonderful," praised the hostess. "You haven't tasted Louise's cakes yet," Martha added with pride in her voice. "Martha, you have to address adults as you," her sister corrected her. "Uncle Austin told me to call him you," she said. Louise looked questioningly at the guest. Austin, as if nothing had happened, said, "Why the ceremony? I think it's easier to communicate this way." After breakfast, Austin, Louise, and Martha went to the biggest shopping and entertainment center in the city. There was everything there: a movie theater, a cafe, a restaurant, a playground. "Yes, Sardi, I'm sorry," Austin replied, getting up from his seat. "Time flies with you. Why don't we all go out again sometime?" "Maybe." Austin stood on the doorstep and looked at Louise. He wanted to kiss her desperately, but he was afraid of ruining the relationship he had just established. Shuffling from foot to foot like a schoolboy, he decided to ask, "Can I kiss you?" Instantly, the girl's cheeks flushed. She wanted to say no, but her tongue wouldn't listen to her. A second pause, and Louise felt Austin's moist lips on hers. Without wanting to, the girl reached for him. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Austin put his arms around her waist and pulled her to him. This kiss, filled with tenderness and affection, was nothing like that first kiss. Louise felt herself starting to lose control of herself and the situation. But suddenly, Austin pulled her away from him just as gently and said, "See you soon." Donna was on the mend quickly. Louise came to her house every day and cleaned her house. She also had to cook meals now. It was good that the vacations had started and the housekeeper had a lot of free time. Martha became a frequent visitor to Donna's house, who was happy to spend time with her while Louise did her chores. Austin rushed home every day after work to spend time with Louise. Donna noticed her son's rapprochement with the housekeeper and did not hide her joy about it. I think Austin has seriously fallen in love with you, she once shared with Louise. It's like he's been replaced. It's true what they say, love works wonders. Louise only smiled at these words and lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She too saw this change, which made her look at the man with different eyes. She felt that she was falling more and more in love with him every day. Alone with Austin, her heart was racing as if it was trying to jump out. Only a little worm in her head kept her mind on her own. It was like it was drilling at the same place, not allowing her to relax and forget. Martha, in spite of her young age, was thinking naturally. Uncle Austin may be a good man, but he's not for you, she told her sister privately. You're different. You seem to like him, don't you? Louise asked. Yes, she confirmed, but he's not real, he's too perfect. When Donna's cast was removed, she was offered to go to a local sanatorium for rehabilitation. Without much thought, the woman agreed, taking a promise from Louisa that she would take care of the house during her absence. Maybe Marta could come with me, the landlady suggested it. It would be a nice change of scenery for the girl, and I would be bored. Martha gladly agreed to Aunt Donna's suggestion, and 2 days later they left for the sanatorium together. That same evening, Austin arranged a romantic candlelight dinner for Louise. Of course, the dinner was prepared by Louise, but while she was busy in the kitchen, he set the table in the living room, dimmed the lights, lit candles, and put on some nice music. What a surprise. The girl was surprised. Like in the best houses of Paris. Why Paris? We're not the best either, I noticed. Demonstratively pushing back his chair, the young man invited Louise to the table. Playing along with him, the girl, lifting her skirt slightly, walked solemnly to the chair and sat down. Austin unsealed a bottle of red wine and filled the glasses. I propose a toast to us, he said. Taking a sip, Louise put the glass back, but Austin made the toast again and again. Even a dense dinner did not relieve the girl, who was not used to alcoholic drinks, from a slight dizziness. Maybe we should dance, Austin suggested, and taking Louise by the hand, led her to the center of the living room. To the quiet, peaceful sounds of music, the young people slowly twirled in a dance. Despite her outward calmness, Louise's insides were trembling. Every touch of Austin stirred her. Her heart periodically tried to jump out of her chest. The wine and the ever-present scent of Austin's cologne were intoxicating. At some point, Louise's legs felt cotton and her eyelids felt heavy. She rested her head on her beau's shoulder and felt his muscles tense. At the same moment, he picked her up in his arms and carried her to his room. What are you doing? Louise asked. Don't say anything, Austin asked in a whisper. Going up to the room, he put her on the bed and laid down next to her. Feeling the girl's inner resistance, he kept her in his arms. I want you to be mine, he whispered and kissed her. This time his kiss was longer and more demanding than all the previous ones. Louise gasped with desire. That little worm that had been keeping her down until now had disappeared without a trace. She could no longer think or analyze what was happening. She just wanted to enjoy the moment. Louise gave free rein to her feelings and desires. The girl wrapped her 2 arms around the man's neck and whispered, yes. She didn't notice when Austin took off her clothes. In those rare moments of consciousness, Louise only noticed that he was gentle with her, then, like a wild animal, rushed at his prey. The pain and fear faded into the background as Austin whispered sweet words in her ear. Never before had she experienced such a flurry of feelings all at once. She felt like she was going to burst, but she didn't. Unable to contain herself any longer, she moaned. From time to time, her moans turned to screams and then back to silence. Soon, her inner trembling spilled outward. Louise was shaking as if from the cold. Her whole body was whimpering. It was not obeying her. Suddenly, Austin's rapid, rhythmic movements became slower until finally they stopped altogether. With a deep exhalation, the man collapsed beside her. Silence hung in the room. Louise's consciousness suddenly cleared. She slowly pulled the blanket over her, shamefully covering herself. Austin lay with his eyes closed and said nothing. Finally, after a few minutes, he got up and headed for the bathroom. Louise didn't know what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that nothing supernatural had happened between them. On the other hand, she was ashamed of her weakness. While she pondered, Austin showered and returned to her, wrapping his torso in a towel. Seeing the girl's embarrassment, he lay down next to her and asked, "How are you feeling?" "Fine," she replied faintly. "You really didn't have anyone before me," Austin said, as if still in doubt. "I thought there were no more of them left nowadays." Louise said nothing, but pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I'm going to get some water," Austin said. "Would you like some?" The girl nodded and, after waiting for him to leave the room, headed for the bathroom. Standing under the shower, she could still feel Austin's touches and kisses on her body. The recent events flashed through her mind, and his voice echoed in her ears. The warm water gradually brought Louise to her senses. Wrapping a large terry towel around herself, she stepped out of the bathroom. Austin was sprawled out on the bed on top of the blanket, looking at her intently. He had his trademark smirk on his face, which made her uncomfortable. But in the next second, Austin smiled and, patting the vacant spot on the bed next to him, said affectionately, "Come to my place, pretty girl." Louise crouched down next to him on the bed uncomplainingly. Austin put his arm around her shoulders and drew her to him and kissed her. "You're hot," he said jokingly. "I didn't expect you to be so passionate. Would you mind doing it again sometime?" Donna and Martha had been at the sanitarium for 2 weeks. All that time, she had been calling her son and the housekeeper periodically to tell them what she was doing and to ask about news from home. Austin went to work every day, and Louise returned to her studies after a short rest. She was still doing chores, but now she often stayed overnight at Donna's house. Ever since Louise had become close to Austin, she had missed him. He was late from work for a good reason, or he had a meeting with friends, or he had to visit a sick boss. Soon Donna and Martha returned home. The girl had a lot of impressions. She told her sister about the wonderful time she had spent with Aunt Donna at the sanatorium. Louise was happy for her, but she couldn't hide her worries about the changes in her life from her hostess. "Tell me what's going on with you and Austin," the woman asked when she was alone with the housekeeper. "Everything is fine," Louise replied, embarrassed by her question. "You don't have to lie to me," Donna asked. "I was happy to learn that you had started a relationship with my son, but I don't see joy in your eyes." "I'm glad," Louise said, "but I think Austin's been spending less time with me. I think he's gotten colder." "Don't make it up," Donna reassured her. "It's just that men can't devote themselves to a woman completely. It's us women who dissolve into them when we fall in love." Louise continued to run the household at Austin's mother's house, but after her return, she no longer stayed overnight. Austin didn't insist. After seeing Louise home, he would go about his business and often return well past midnight. Donna did not like her son's late nights out, but she did not give him away, hoping that he would come to his senses and change. As time passed, however, nothing much changed. The woman noticed how sad her housekeeper was. She felt sorry for her, so she decided to intervene. "Austin, we need to talk," she said sternly one day to her son, who was going to another meeting with his friends. "Mother, not now," he asked her. The word mother cut Donna's hearing. Austin had been calling her mom lately, and she was insanely pleased with it. What had happened today? Why mom again? "Did something happen to you?" she asked. "Trouble at work?" "No, everything's fine there. I'm still getting a tiny salary," the son replied in a disgruntled tone. "I've offered you many times to go into business with me," the woman reminded him. "I don't want my mother to be my boss," Austin said. "When you're ready to retire, then call me." "What's the matter with Louise?" she asked me directly. "What do you mean?" Austin pretended not to understand. "Don't pretend. Louise is a good girl. She'll make a fine wife. You're lucky she paid attention to you." "What? She took notice of me," he interjected dismissively. "She should be thanking the universe that a man like me came her way." At that time, the housekeeper had finished cleaning and was on her way to the living room to say goodbye to the owners. The conversation between mother and son made her stop outside the door. Louise had never allowed herself to eavesdrop on other people's conversations before, but this one concerned her directly, so she put her ear to the keyhole for a better hearing and froze. "I'm sure she's grateful," her mother parried. "You've been dating for months now. When are you going to propose to her?" "What are you talking about, Mom?" I asked a normal question. When young people date, they make plans for the future. "Are you thinking of marrying Louise?" "No, of course not." Austin grinned. "Who am I? And who is she?" Do you think I'm going to marry some housekeeper? She's only a housekeeper because of circumstances, the landlady said. But you know she's about to get her high school diploma, right? So what? Austin didn't give up. What difference does it make? She's a simpleton. I'm attracted to more interesting girls, with big boobs and empty heads. Donna got angry. I wish she was. There's no shame in going out with them. Austin, I had a better opinion of you, she admitted. I thought you were a smart, serious, forward-thinking man, and you still can't get over it. Mother, don't lecture me, he asked. I won't let you hurt Louise. The girl has been through enough in this life. I'm not going to hurt her, the man replied. Isn't that how it works? You meet and then you run away. Seeing that her son could not be persuaded, Donna bitterly waved her hand and left the living room. Frustrated, she headed for the stairs, not even noticing the housekeeper standing outside the door. Louise didn't move. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She realized that Austin had deceived her. When she returned home, she cried into her pillow all night. The next morning, she woke up with a firm decision to sever all relations with the family in whose house she had worked for many months. Arriving at Donna's house, Louise made her way to the landlady's house. Austin had already left for work. Trying to hide the traces of her worries from the housekeeper, the landlady asked with a smile, "How are you, Louise? How's Martha?" Not wanting to beat around the bush, the girl said directly, "Donna, I heard you talking to your son yesterday. You do realize that under these circumstances, I can't continue to work in your house. Maybe things will change," she said with hope in her voice. "Maybe Austin would come to his senses. You can't force a favor," Louise said firmly, "and I don't like to talk to him and pretend that nothing has happened." "Yes, I understand," agreed the landlady. "You're probably right. I'm sorry about what happened." "It wasn't your fault," Louise replied. "You don't have to apologize to me for your son. He is a grown man and he can take responsibility for his own actions." Louise hadn't worked at Donna's house for several days. She was completely absorbed in her studies to get Austin out of her mind. Martha realized that something was going on with her sister, but she didn't ask her questions unless she got an answer. Donna, feeling guilty, didn't abandon the girls. She often came to visit them with gifts. The women tried not to bring up the subject of Austin, pretending that he did not exist. When Donna came to visit her sisters again, she said, "Louise, I have an offer for you that you can't refuse." Intrigued, smiled the girl. "I want to take you into my business," she informed me. "In a few months, you'll get your diploma and you'll be looking for a job. I suggest you skip the job search and come to me for an internship right now." "But I probably won't be able to do that," Louise said nervously. "I don't understand anything about your business." "What am I for?" Donna asked cheerfully. "I'll teach you everything. If you want to leave and work in your specialty, I won't hold you back. And if you like it, I promise you career advancement and a good salary." "Say yes, Louise." Martha jumped up and down. After a moment's thought, Louise smiled and nodded in agreement. "I'll do my best," she promised. "Thank you." A few months flew by. All this time, Louise was writing her thesis and interning at Donna's company. The former owner, now director, was pleased with the new employee. Louise was a quick learner. She quickly joined the team and earned the respect of her colleagues. Now she devoted all her free time to herself and her little sister. Louise, knowing about her natural beauty, nevertheless, following the advice of her boss, began to visit beauty salons, watch her appearance, updated her closet, and enrolled in the gym. For a diamond to become a diamond, it needs a professional cut, Donna liked to say. And Louise had learned that. Young men looked at her and tried to ask her out every now and then. But Louise didn't have affairs at work. The memories of her failed relationship with Austin were still fresh in her mind. The girl was not ready to jump into the maelstrom again. One day, the director of the company came to work in a bad mood. Never before had she allowed herself to raise her voice at her subordinates, and on this day her shouting was heard from the very morning. Employees did not leave their workplaces, afraid to be seen by her. After gathering her courage, Louisa entered the principal's office and saw that the woman who had just raged was standing at the window, wiping tears from her face. "Donna, is something wrong?" Louisa ran up to her and asked, "Can I help you?" The principal didn't react to her words for a while, but then she turned, looked at the girl carefully, and answered, "Austin is going to get married." The news hit Louise like a blow to the head. All this time she had been trying in vain to forget Austin. She couldn't say that she still loved him, but his desire to marry someone else had hurt her feelings. Louise swallowed the lump in her throat and said as calmly as she could, "It had to happen sometime. Maybe Austin will settle down now." "I hoped until the last day that he'd come to his senses and come back to you," Donna admitted. "I am flattered by your words," Louisa replied, "but I don't think I could forgive him, so let him be happy with his girlfriend." The headmistress hugged the girl and smiled with sadness in her eyes. "What a pity my son never realized what goal he had lost." From now on, Louisa spent a lot of time in the principal's office. Donna wanted to share her worries about the upcoming celebration with someone, and she found no better listener than Louise. The last thing she wanted to know was the details of the preparations for Austin's marriage, but she didn't dare to tell his mother, so she listened to her stories for hours. It was clear from Donna's remarks that she wasn't happy with her daughter-in-law. "A narcissistic painted doll," she said of her, born with a golden spoon in her mouth and never took it out her whole life. Her father spoiled her, instilled in her that everything is bought and sold, and when he was gone, he died 3 years ago. His wife, a slacker, spent all his $1 million fortune on lovers. Now, with no one to help her, she decides to set up her daughter. What they don't know is that Austin's broke and living off me. "Why don't you tell them?" Louise asked. "Why should I? Jasmine comes to our house and talks to me for hours about her great love for my son. Why destroy such love? And Austin, does he love her? I don't know. Sometimes I don't think he's capable of feeling that way at all. I've decided to stay out of his life. Let them live as they please." Finally, the day finally arrived. Despite Donna's pleas for a low-key wedding celebration, the young couple feasted on the world. Of course, it was not without the financial support of mothers. Donna immediately warned her son that the wedding and the wedding gift will be her last investment in him. And the mother of the bride collected the remnants of the untold wealth of her deceased husband and gave them to her daughter's wedding on the condition that after marriage, she will return everything to her with more than enough. After the festivities, the newlyweds went on a wedding trip, which Donna gave them, and she herself returned to work. The director answered congratulations and questions from her subordinates dryly and reluctantly. One could sense that the woman was worried about her son's future, but she did not change her principles. "He is a grown man, not stupid, with a good education," Louise reassured Austin's mother. "He'll be fine. You'll laugh when you remember how you shed tears for nothing." "How kind you are," Donna said, not hiding her admiration. "God give you a good fiancé." "He will," laughed the girl, "all in good time." "My man, I want to talk to you," said Austin on his return from the wedding trip. "Let's talk," Donna agreed. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" No, the man was miffed. "I just wanted to learn your business from the inside, so to speak." "Well, this is unexpected. You've always been against the mother superior." "Everything in this world is changeable," Austin replied philosophically. "I changed my mind. Maybe you'll want to hand over your authority to me too, when you're convinced that I'm doing a good job with your enterprise." Austin and his young wife had returned from a wedding trip the day before. Being weary on the road, they went straight to their room, whence they did not come out all the evening. It was not until the next morning, while Jasmine was lying in bed, that Austin came into the parlor and had an unexpected conversation with his mother. "Well, I don't mind," Donna said. "My business is going to be lambasted by you anyway, so it's better to get into it beforehand. When are you planning on going to work?" "Oh, we could do it today. I don't think I'll get into the process right away, so first I'll get to know the staff, get used to the office." Mother grinned and looked at her watch and said, "Then you have 15 minutes. I don't like my employees to be late. I'll wait for you at the car." While Austin searched for a clean iron shirt, the time for packing was over. He kissed his sleeping wife at the last moment and got into the car with his mother, who had already left. "I didn't even have time for breakfast," he complained. "Why didn't your wife see you off?" the woman asked. "Jasmine is still asleep. Doesn't she have to go to work today?" "My man, what are you doing?" Austin grinned. "In her family, women don't work." "Ours do," Donna retorted. "Or does she think I'm going to feed and clothe her for the rest of her life?" "I will." Austin stood up for his lady. "I'll be able to provide for my woman and then for my children." And what will your woman do? Home. A wife's duty is to keep the hearth and bear children. Donna looked at her son in silence and continued to follow the road. Soon they arrived at the factory. Austin walked in step with his mother, trying to establish himself as a strict boss in front of his subordinates from the first minutes. He had been to his parents' kingdom many times as a teenager, but then he had been here as a guest, and now he had come with the purpose of taking the throne. Practically nothing had changed here, Austin noticed, just more employees. Yes, production is expanding, business is booming, Donna agreed. With the right management, it's a profitable business. We're here. Where? Austin didn't understand. Your office, if memory serves, is on the top floor. I thought I'd be sitting next to you. Sitting, my dear son, is not going to work, she replied. If you're here to work, you'll have to work hard. I'm used to being alone in my office. Here is your workplace. The director pointed to a vacant desk among the other desks where the employees were working. Austin glanced around the large workshop and looked at his mother with a puzzled look. You're not going to put me in the shop, are you? He asked. You wanted to get to know the production from the inside, she reminded him. When you master the technology, I will transfer you to the quality department. Mom, but I'm your son. Austin was indignant. You're my employee here. The director replied, turned around and walked toward the stairs. If something is unclear, ask your colleagues. The man did not argue with his mother, deciding to continue the conversation in the evening at home. It was not until lunchtime that he managed to have breakfast and lunch. Sitting at the table with a bored look, he watched the workers. Suddenly, his gaze stopped on a very elegant young woman. It was clear from her demeanor and mannerisms that she held not a small position in this enterprise. Mesmerized by her beauty and grace, Austin did not immediately recognize the well-groomed, blooming young woman as Louise. He had, of course, heard from his mother that she had invited her former housekeeper to join her at the company, but he had not expected to see such a change in her. There was not a trace of that simpleton left. She walked with a confident stride, responding to the greetings of the employees with a slight nod. Austin, as if mesmerized, did not take his eyes off her. The episodes of their date suddenly appeared in his mind. He remembered how he pursued her, and once he'd gotten her, he lost interest. It seemed to him that he even remembered the taste and smell of the food she cooked. Have you had lunch yet? Came his mother's voice from upstairs. Looking up, Austin saw his mother and nodded to her. She put the tray of food on the table and sat down across from her son. Have you changed your mind about working at my company? She asked. Austin looked at Louise and asked, Who does your housekeeper work here? You mean Louise? The woman clarified. She's my right-hand woman. I don't know how I managed without her. When I'm away, she runs the place. Wow, so some housekeeper is the boss and the director's son is just a laborer. Louise learned the manufacturing process from scratch, and she's a quick study, Donna said. If you try as hard as she did, you'll soon have your own office. Austin wasn't excited about the prospect. He'd assumed he'd be in charge right away, but he'd miscalculated. If it hadn't been for his wife, he would have left his mother that very day. But Jessamine insisted that it was time for him to take the whole business into his own hands, not to depend on his mother. So the man got up and headed into the shop to his workplace. Hello, dear. Met Jessamine, her husband, after the first day of work at the new place. How are you doing? Normal, Austin replied in a tired voice. What are we having for dinner tonight? I thought we were going out to a restaurant to celebrate your first day as boss. Jessamine, what restaurant? What boss? I don't think I've ever been as tired as I am today. What were you doing? The girl asked. Working. So we're not going to the restaurant, she said, stretching her lips. Well, what is it, mistress? Set the table. Donna, who had just entered the house, asked and went to her room. After changing her clothes, she went down to the dining room and seeing the empty table asked, Are we having dinner tonight? Mom, Jessamine suggested we celebrate my new assignment at the restaurant, Austin said. What's there to celebrate? The woman was surprised. When you become a boss, then we'll celebrate. Until then, I see no reason to celebrate. I do not understand, admitted Jessamine. And now you are what, if not the boss? And now your husband is an ordinary employee in the shop, explained his mother. A good boss is the one who rose to this post from below. The mother-in-law's answer dumbfounded her daughter-in-law. At first, she stood with her mouth open and silently flapped her eyes, and then she grinned. My husband's a laborer? Yes, Donna confirmed. You could be proud of him. He's a hard worker. What have you been doing all day? I went to my mom's, and then I went to the beauty parlor with her. I just got back, said Jasmine. I'm really tired and hungry. Why don't we go to a restaurant after all? Austin looked at his mother, but she turned and went into the kitchen. Jasmine, he turned to his wife. I spent a lot of money on vacation. The paycheck isn't due for a while. If we go to the restaurant now, we'll be broke by the end of the month. What are you talking about? She asked with irritation in her voice. I married one of the richest men in town, and now you're telling me that we don't have any money. You know what kind of spending we've been doing for the last month, don't you? My card isn't unlimited. Ask your mother. She won't refuse her only son. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Austin replied. We're adults and we have to support ourselves. She doesn't have to support us. She's got a good job. Jasmine was indignant, referring to her mother-in-law. She earns so much money and lives with her son. When you were single, all right, someone had to look after you. But now that you're married, you might want to think about moving out. Where would she go? Austin asked. It's her house. Why does she need such a big house all by herself? We have a family, we'll have children. An apartment would be enough for her. At that moment, Donna appeared in the living room where the newlyweds were. Let's go to dinner, she called her son and daughter-in-law. Already sitting at the table, she warned Austin's wife. Don't think it's going to be like this every day. There's never been a slacker in this family. If you don't work, you'd better keep the house in order and cook dinner. I'm not your housekeeper or cook, snapped at Jasmine. I'm not going to ruin my manicure and hands by scrubbing your floors. Donna looked questioningly at her son, then at her daughter-in-law. What did you get married for? Donna asked. It is the husband's duty to provide for his wife. And what is the wife's duty? Austin's mother asked. The mother-in-law's question stumped Jasmine. She shifted her gaze from her husband to her mother-in-law and tried in vain to find the right words. Finally, the girl gathered her thoughts and answered, It is the wife's duty to bear and bring up children. Good, said Donna, and who will feed and wash them? There should be a housekeeper for that, reasoned Jasmine. In case you haven't noticed, we don't have a housekeeper, replied her mother-in-law. I've been doing the housework myself so far. I think I can still make myself a bowl of soup and iron a dress, but I won't take care of my son anymore. He has a wife now. If you hire a housekeeper, I won't mind, but you'll have to pay for it yourself. After dinner, Donna washed the dishes and went to her room, leaving the newlyweds alone. I don't think your mother likes me, Jasmine concluded. She's always trying to embarrass me in front of you. Don't make it up. Austin stood up for his mother. It's just that she wants to keep you busy. I see. I don't think we're going to get along in this house together. We should give her a hint about moving out. Why don't you talk to your mother? Talking to her wouldn't be a problem, Austin said. I just don't want you and me to have to look for an apartment. Long sleep, son, remarked Donna, putting on her jacket and heading for the exit. You're leaving already? Austin clarified. Aren't you going to wait for me? I warned you, I don't like it when employees are late, and I'm never late myself, her mother replied and disappeared out the door. Austin, disgruntled, wandered into the kitchen. The table was empty, and there was nothing in the refrigerator that looked like a cooked breakfast. Deciding to grab a snack on his way to work, he slammed the refrigerator door shut and went to his room. His spouse was sleeping like a baby. Austin looked in the closet and found no iron shirt. Jasmine, he called to his wife quietly. Iron my shirt. The girl only rolled over to the other side. Jasmine, he repeated louder. I have nothing to go to work in. The wife opened her eyes, stretched and replied with a smile. Then don't go. She reached out her arms to her husband and pulled him into bed, wrapping him in her arms. Austin didn't resist much. He liked it when Jasmine was gentle and affectionate with him. After lying in bed with his wife, Austin looked at his watch and realized that he was finally late for work. That's great, he said, getting out of bed, but Mom won't like my absences. I could end up unemployed. Oh, come on. Jasmine grinned, grumbles, and will return. She won't kick out her only son. You don't know my mother well. You're just like a little delinquent child. Laughed Jasmine. Maybe we'd better go out? You've completely stopped taking me to restaurants. I explained everything to you. We have no money now." After these words, the girl became furious. "I don't want to hear it. I married a millionaire and he turned out to be a starving man. Either you talk to your mother today and dot all the I's and dot all the I's, or—" Jasmine paused to think of the second option, "or I'll have to do it." Austin didn't show up for work until lunchtime. The principal immediately called him into her office. It was clear from her stern look and stern tone that there was no good news. When she was alone with her son, she said, "You asked to work for me. I kindly agreed, brought you to the enterprise, explained all the procedures. But you decided they didn't concern you. If you change your mind, I won't hold you back. Just write your notice and go." Austin assumed that this was the format of their conversation, so he prepared himself morally. "My man," he said to her in a calm voice, "let's not be too hasty. I'm your only heir, so sooner or later you'll have to hand over the reins to me. Why all this circus with a simple laborer, then a foreman, and so on? Everyone should be in their place. I didn't go to university so I can work as a laborer. If it weren't for these, as you say, simple laborers, you wouldn't be living in a huge house now and eating caviar sandwiches." Speaking of sandwiches, Austin caught on. "I'm late today because I spent a long time making breakfast and ironing my shirt. Why doesn't your wife cook and iron for you? I thought you said the husband was the provider and the wife the keeper." "Jasmine does not feel like a mistress in our house," complained Austin, "and I can understand that. You can't have two mistresses in the same kitchen." "I agree. So think about a separate place to live. That way, maybe your Jasmine will be a better hostess sooner." Austin realized that the conversation was not going the way he wanted it to, so he decided to leave. His mother stopped him on the doorstep. "And think about the job. And for today's absenteeism, I will deduct from your salary." Only when he left the principal's office, Austin gave vent to his feelings. "What a mother. When I was a kid, she was at work 24 hours a day, and now she's taking over my upbringing. It's too late for that. We'll see who'll be the first to come begging for help. You're not getting any younger." He turned to her in his heart. "And you're not taking your business with you. And when you're having a hard time coping, you'll call me yourself. Are you all right?" A familiar voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Austin looked up and saw Louise in front of him. She was walking toward the principal with a stack of file folders. The girl looked at him as if he were a stranger. Not a single muscle on her face trembled. Austin even thought that she might not have recognized him. "Louise? You look good." He perked up. "How are you?" "Thank you," the girl replied calmly. "I'm doing fine. And you? I thought you looked upset." "You seemed upset." "Well, okay." She shrugged her shoulders and continued on her way. "Wait," Austin called out to her. "Why don't we meet tonight? We can sit and talk." "No," Louise said firmly. "I don't date married men. And there's nothing to talk about." Without waiting for the former suitor's answer, the girl went to the principal's office. Austin stood and watched her. Miniature, as if chiseled by the hand of a master, elegantly dressed, in expensive stiletto shoes, she walked down the corridor, swaying her hips. The young man could not take his eyes off her. As if mesmerized, he looked at her and remembered the nights he had spent with her. "Pretty girl," on an exhalation said an unfamiliar male voice behind him. "I can't take my eyes off her." Austin looked at the man in his work uniform with disdain and replied, "Nothing much," and to close the subject added, "And you go where you're going." Married life was getting more and more stressful for Austin. This was not how he had envisioned it. Jasmine was always demanding money, and his mother wouldn't give him a penny on principle. Previously, Austin's salary was enough for fun and partying. All other expenses were completely on his mother. Now he had to support himself and his wife. And as it turned out, his salary was not enough for all that. "Austin, since we moved in, you've stopped spending time with me," my wife complained. "Why don't we go to a club tonight?" "Jasmine, what club?" "I work from morning till night, and I barely have enough money to make ends meet." "How long are you going to be your mother's apprentice?" asked the disgruntled wife. "You can't make a deal with your own mother." "I already have," Austin replied with irritation in his voice. "You couldn't live in her house on your own, so we moved out. You can forget about clubs and restaurants now." "All set." Jasmine was indignant. "Your mother showed us from the very beginning that we are unnecessary. She was trying to get us to move into a rented apartment. If you'd done anything around the house, none of this would have happened. So it's all my fault? Well, I'm sorry. You should have told me you didn't want a wife, but a housekeeper. I've never held a rag or a frying pan since I was a kid. And you thought that if I married you, I'd become a cook and a cleaner. Wrong, hubby. If you can't earn a decent living for your wife, that's your problem, and you don't need to put it on your head. Letting out her anger, Jasmine immediately made a cute face, stretched her lips, and slammed her long eyelashes. Well, darling, why don't you ask your mother for money? Darling, Austin answered in her tone of voice. Don't you want to help me solve our problems? How? Like getting a job, he suggested. Oh, really? Are you kidding? What will my friends say? The girl said she was scared. They'll laugh at me. What's so funny about working? Only losers and peasants work. Do you think my mother and I are losers? Was your father, who made $1 million, a loser or a villain? Her husband's example stumped Jasmine, but she quickly thought of something to answer. My father is an exception, and you're a loser. Couldn't agree with your mother on the basics. Now you're just a coward to her. I have a feeling this conversation isn't going to get us anywhere, Austin concluded. Whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn how to run a household. I don't have a single fresh shirt left. The refrigerator is empty. There's a thick layer of dust on the furniture and on the floor. I can't go on like this. Yes, I agree. I don't want to live in filth. I'm sick of eating your scrambled eggs and store-bought dumplings. I'm going to my mom's. When you get rich, call me. Jasmine gathered her things and left, slamming the door loudly. Austin didn't hold her back, figuring that without her, it would be easier for him to go back to his mother's house and maybe get her to make him his deputy. And he had miscalculated. Donna, after listening to her son's sob story about his wife leaving him, decided to give him a second chance. She trusted him to run the business for the duration of her business trip. Donna had been planning to open a branch in another city for years. Now she was on her way to take care of it locally. She left Louise to look after Austin. The girl had studied the details of production during her work, and now she could understand all the nuances as well as the owner of the enterprise. Sometimes Donna would say in her heart of hearts, I wish you were my daughter. You and I would have broken mountains together. After his mother's departure, Austin returned to her home and the same day did not fail to tell the news to his wife. Jasmine had been living in her parents' house for a few days, but did not know how to move out. Her mother brought another Alfonso Lubovnik with whom she squandered the rest of her husband's fortune. She gradually sold off expensive furniture, her jewelry, and talked about selling the car and the house. To her daughter's unhappy reproaches, she answered the same thing. You first lived with your husband as many years as I lived. Make him earn the same fortune as your father earned, and then dispose of it. When she learned of the change in Austin's life, Jasmine rushed to him the same day. We must take advantage of the situation, she instructed her husband. Now that you have access to your mother's money, you can transfer a small amount from the company account to your own account, which will be enough for us at first. And gradually you will gain her trust and take over the reins. Do you think it's so easy to withdraw money from the company's account? Austin doubted his wife's words. I'm sure it won't be that easy for you, she replied. You're a smart, educated man, and who would notice a small amount of money in such a huge enterprise? Besides, no one will dare say anything to you. You are the son of the owner, and therefore the future director. Austin didn't like his wife's idea, but she had a good point. Of course, he was entitled to his mother's money, and there might never be a better opportunity. After a little thought, the man decided to act. He realized that the old employees who had worked at the company since its founding, he did not help him. But among the newcomers, there was a young man, arrogant for the reward. After a few days, Austin and his wife could afford to hire a housekeeper, make a few new clothes, even pay off the debt to his mother Jasmine. Now they could go to clubs and dine in restaurants. To Luisa's questions, Austin answered in a commanding voice. Don't poke your nose where it doesn't belong. This is my mother's business, which means it's mine. I think Donna should know about it, the assistant said. She knows, the young man assured her. And you're just jealous. You didn't want to meet me, and now you're biting your elbows. But I'm not vindictive. My offer still stands. Why don't we have dinner tonight? I don't think your wife would like that, Louise replied. I don't think she's expecting me for dinner. Every day, Austin became more and more into the role of the boss. He spoke disrespectfully and in a commanding tone to his subordinates, was late for work, or even didn't show up at all. He constantly needed money for his beautiful life, and now he knew where to get it. Austin and Jasmine never denied themselves anything, but the beautiful life of the newlyweds did not last long. Donna soon found out about the shenanigans of her son and daughter-in-law. The business trip had to be interrupted early and returned to the city. Man, Austin was surprised to see his mother on the doorstep. "What are you doing here?" "Living," she answered dryly. "But you must be on a business trip." The young man still couldn't believe his eyes. "I should be," Donna confirmed, picking up her suitcase. "And you're supposed to be at work, shouldn't you?" Austin glanced at his watch and remained silent. Just then, Jasmine's voice came from upstairs. "Austin, well, how long do you have to wait? I'm going to die of thirst." "Jasmine, my mom is here," Austin told his wife. 2 minutes later, his sister-in-law was already coming down the stairs to the living room. "Donna, you're back already?" she asked in an oily voice. "We weren't expecting you so early." "You mean you haven't had time to spend all my money?" she said sternly. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jasmine retorted. "Austin is at work day and night. I hardly see him." "From today, Austin will be at your complete disposal," the woman replied and turned to her son. "You no longer work at the company." While Austin and Jasmine, dumbfounded by the arrival of their landlady, stood looking at each other, Donna dragged her suitcase to the second floor and disappeared into her room. But a moment later, she came out of her room and said, "And have the house cleared out by tonight." "Mother, this is my house too. Don't forget, I'm your own son." Austin resented her. "You can't kick me out every time. The deed is mine, but you're not my son anymore. I will not tolerate traitors in my house. I've worked my whole life to make sure you had nothing. I gave you a great education. And how did you take advantage of all that? Steal from me? And then you have the nerve to tell me you're my son. Take your slacker wife and get out of my house. And if you dare disobey me, I'll file a police report on you." After the scandal, Donna locked herself in her room. Trying to distract herself from her heavy thoughts, she unpacked her suitcase, took a hot bath, and went to the company. The employees greeted her happily. "Donna, I apologize for having to distract you from important negotiations," Louisa said upon meeting her. "But don't apologize." The director interrupted her. "You did the right thing. A little more and my negotiations would have become irrelevant." At that time, the chief accountant came into the director's office. "Come in, Emerald." Donna invited her in. "And you stay," she said to Louise. The girl remained standing where she was. The chief accountant went to the director's desk and put down a folder of papers. "Here is the expense report for the entire period of your absence." Donna looked through the papers carefully and only after studying them to the end asked, "Who helped him?" "Darren," Emerald replied. "When I went on sick leave as you instructed, he stayed on for me. Austin promised him a generous reward. Of course, all the operations were not done without my knowledge and strictly out of the money you left behind." "I see," Donna said without hiding her disappointment. It was a pity that Austin had chosen to use the opportunity to prove himself as a leader. But I'd rather find out now that he's not capable of replacing me than have him ruin my business later. "Donna, did you arrange this trip on purpose?" Louise asked. "Did you know about it before I called?" "It was a real and very successful business trip," the director replied. "But I didn't immediately decide to entrust my son with the management of the company. I realized that he was inexperienced in this business, and I wanted to see how he would deal with the issues that arose, who he would consult, and whether he would do anything at all. On Emerald's advice, I set aside a small amount of money for contingencies. Of course, Austin didn't know anything. It was a test," Donna sighed and added with bitterness in her voice, "and he didn't pass it." For several days, the principal looked depressed and preoccupied. She was silent most of the time. When she was alone with her thoughts, she sighed often. Louise tried to stay close to her. She genuinely felt sorry for Donna. It had been a long time since they had met, and she had become a close person to the sisters. Now that the woman was alone, they supported her, for which Donna was grateful to the girls. 10 years had passed. The relationship between mother and son could hardly be called kinship. Austin lived in a rented apartment and worked in a small office in his specialty. With his wife he had long since divorced, Jessamine found a better candidate. They never had children. Louise had been married for several years and was raising a daughter. Martha graduated from high school and went to college. Donna supported the girls in everything. Over the years they had, indeed, become family. One day the director called Louisa into her office and said, "I've decided to pass my brainchild on to you. You are the only one who will be able to carry on my work with dignity. And you, are you going somewhere?" "No, I'll be around. And if you need me, I'll help you. But I'm getting restless." "What about Austin?" she asked uncertainly. "He's your son." "Austin is my son by blood, nothing more. You and Martha are my daughters in spirit, and you are more dear to me. I know I can rely on you. Unfortunately for me, I never got to be a mom to Austin." "Donna, everyone makes mistakes." Louise tried to stick up for him. "I'm sure he's regretted it many times over. If he had, he'd come and apologize. But he still thinks he's wronged, and I have no desire to prove anything to him." Soon, Louise became director of the company. A year later, Donna died. It turned out she'd been ill for a long time, but she'd never told anyone. Austin, after the funeral, moved into his mother's house, but his joy was short-lived. Donna bequeathed the house to Louise and bought her son a spacious apartment. In addition, she opened a bank account in Austin's name, from which he could withdraw a certain amount each month. What a mother! The man cursed heartily when he heard about his parents' will. Leave everything to some housekeeper, and the son has to live in poverty. The housekeeper has done more for her than her own son. He heard a girl's voice from behind him. Martha looked at Austin with contempt and left the notary's office.